He is Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. You are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. And starting a week from tomorrow, next Wednesday, we're going to be here at the Boston Public Library 3 days a week, and of course at the Newsfeed Cafe 3 days a week. At noon, we're going to be joined by the Governor, Maura Healey. She'll take our questions and yours.
Hi, Marjorie.
Hello, Jim.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
First, though, now we're joined by Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell. She's with us for the whole first hour, taking our questions and yours for Ask the Attorney General, obviously. If you have a question for her, you can call or text at 877-301-8970, or you can go see our colleague Hannah, who will now raise her hand. Hello, Hannah. And you can ask a question directly to the Attorney General, and this is where I say, hello, Attorney General Campbell. Nice to see you.
Great to see
Hello.
you.
Thanks for coming.
Everybody.
Thank you very much, Attorney General Campbell, for coming in. So we have some breaking
People
news.
are waving in the crowd.
They're
This is
waving.
great.
That's great.
Thank you.
We have some breaking news here. You have filed suit against the town of Milton because they failed to comply with the MBTA communities law about creating zoning for more multiple family housing. So what's the story?
So, I mean, obviously, I think folks have been following the issue and the recent referendum and election in Milton where voters came out and voted against the town complying with the MBTA communities law. So I will say, one, I think it's crystal clear to everyone, including folks in Milton, that we are in a housing crisis, and that doesn't just affect someone's ability to have shelter and to be safe. It affects our economy, our workforce. Housing is one critical tool to build wealth. It allows us to close the racial wealth gap. You name it, it is significant. And we've said from the beginning we're going to focus on it because we understand affordability is a major issue. The MBTA communities law, which I have to remind folks, is a reasonable piece of legislation. It was signed by Governor Baker, who worked with the Democratic legislature to get it done as one significant tool to address this housing crisis. And when I got into office, immediately put out an advisory making it crystal clear to all the municipalities that have the T as a public transit that this was a mandatory law. And then every step of the way have been working with the governor and the administration to offer technical assistance and advice. So then we get to a place where Milton, which is a rapid transit community and defined themselves as such last year and again at the beginning of the year, or I should say in 2022 and at the beginning of last year, has decided not to comply with this law. So we're simply keeping our word of suing the town, seeking a court order for the court to say not only is the law mandatory, but that they absolutely have to comply with the law and continuing to be reasonable every step of the way.
A couple of questions about the suit against Milton and what Milton did. And by the way, our number is 877-301-8970 if you want to call or text the Attorney General herself. I know this is a stupid question, and I'm worried I'm going to be embarrassed when you answer it, but I'm going to plow ahead anyway. We talked about Milton almost every day for days here, and in the middle of one of the conversations, I said, I forget, a yes person had just called in and said, well, if you're voting no in my hometown of Milton, that person's hometown, you're voting to violate the law. And so the question is, why does a community have a right to vote to violate the law? They couldn't vote to say breaking into somebody's home in Milton is legal. So why is there even a vote to begin with if the only legal option is a yes? Is it a stupid question?
It's not a stupid question.
Thank
it's
you.
actually a question.
Thank you. I appreciate your generosity of spirit. Go ahead.
It's also a question that the team contemplated, but we felt we want to focus on the issue at hand. The ballot happened, the referendum happened. We will continue to explore whether or not we go in that direction in terms of it being valid or not. But it is what it is. I think what we want to make crystal clear, not only to Milton, but to any other municipality that is contemplating doing this.
There are 130 left to vote, roughly, right?
That's several,
this year.
right.
Okay, yeah.
So that any town that is contemplating following Milton's direction, not to do that. And frankly, to get the court to immediately not only make a decision that agrees with us, that this law is mandatory, it is not voluntary. And the second piece that's really important is them ordering Milton to comply. And we think that this reasonable step that we're taking will then, of course, encourage and incentivize every other municipality to proceed as they already are in coming into compliance with the MBTA.
Do you have any question that it's mandatory? Obviously, you don't.
There's no doubt.
So then, since you said my question was not stupid, why don't you just put out a letter to the 130 communities that Rentham's voting tonight, and another 100 and whatever, 10 dozen or so? You don't have a choice. So this law is in effect in your community now no vote is necessary, unless I'm missing something.
Well, we're continuing to make that clear, and we could have focused our energy on going back and forth on whether or not the referendum itself was a legal action they took. Instead, we're focused on the law itself and the enforcement of it, and we're confident that if, in our arguments, but if the court agrees with us and gives us this reasonable remedy, that Milton will ultimately come into compliance, and every other municipality will not do what Milton did.
And what happens when they don't come into compliance?
So there are other steps that we can take. Even in our complaint, we were very limited, I should say, or limited sort of the remedies we were seeking at this stage. But if, for example, the court says not only is this law mandatory, but also, Milton, you have to come into compliance immediately, we also can sort of push Milton, and if they don't, we can go back to that same court and seek other remedies, forcing maybe permits to be issued, someone to be appointed to oversee this process. There's a lot that we can do, but again, every step of the way, we have been reasonable, we have been fair. And I want to add one point on this. This law is not only significant, it is really essential to addressing this housing crisis. And that's why Governor Baker worked with Democrats to get it done. The other piece is, as Secretary Augustus, who's our new housing secretary, and his team worked to propose regulations. They met and communicated with towns. We did the same. So any town that said, well, the law is difficult for us to come into compliance with because, for example, location. We don't have space to develop housing of this type. The agency went back to the drawing board, revised the regulations to afford that municipality the flexibility they would need to be able to come into compliance. So every step of the way, you have an agency in our office offering that technical assistance, listening and being responsive and being extremely reasonable. And in this case, you have a small subset of residents who are driving this opposition. And frankly, we hope that not only we continue to stay in touch with the yes folks, but we get folks on the no side to shift their perspective, and also those who didn't even participate in the election to pay attention and understand how important this issue is.
That's the Attorney General, Andrea Joy Campbell. She's here for the hour. We'll get to your questions in just a minute.
Just one more thing before we get to those questions. You know, we have a big mess with Stewart Healthcare. They serve a lot of people who are a low income, a lot of Medicaids and stuff. They may be going broke here. The Attorney General, Healy, when she was Attorney General, wrote a report saying that they were in financial trouble, but nothing was really done about this. And now they're not showing the Governor Healy now, all that she needs about their money. There's the disclosures that she asked them for. So I'm wondering, is there any role for you at this stage of the game with Stewart Healthcare?
There's a significant role the AG's office plays, and I, along with the team, and we're following this issue closely, as you can imagine. It's a devastating issue. The state of affairs with Stewart is sad, depressing, and frankly, just in many ways unacceptable. So we're sort of doing a couple of things. One is, in the immediate, working with HHS, the governor, the administration, in problem-solving mode. How do we ensure that folks are continuing to access their health care? How do we ensure that the providers, the doctors and nurses providing that health care are getting paid? How do we make sure that we're keeping these institutions afloat as best we can? That we have to do in communication with HHS and the administration. The second is the accountability piece for Stewart. We have some time for that. Our office plays a significant role there. I can't say a lot on what we can do and don't do because it is an active and ongoing matter. But I can tell the public, I am concerned about the lack of transparency, and we will continue to push them to produce documents, not only for the administration, but also for our purposes. And then the second is, on that accountability, we will absolutely hold them accountable, not only for anything that transpired to get us to this place by Stewart, but even looking forward. How do we make sure that this just doesn't happen again in Massachusetts? So more to come on that.
Governor Healy thinks that there may be something criminal here. Do you think so?
We're still actively exploring, and frankly, we need more information before we can make any assessment or proceed down any civil or criminal lane.
Well, can I ask one question about a criminal thing, if I may? What we do know, courtesy of Brian McGrory's columns, former editor of the Globe, is 2 jets were purchased by the company. They're allegedly selling them now for tens of millions of dollars. At the same time, thanks to Globe reporting, we found out that at least one woman died because an item that could, a piece of equipment that could have saved her life was repossessed. Is that not at least borderline criminal when you're enriching yourself at the same time that you're putting the lives of your clients, your patients, at risk?
So I'll say a couple of things. I cannot say much there. I want to say that we will absolutely hold anyone responsible for the current state of affairs accountable. We are first focused on making sure that I can't stress enough, ensuring that people not only continue to have access to health care, but if folks along the way, and I've read that horrific story too, feel as though their health care is being jeopardized, the Department of Public Health, reach out to them. They have monitors monitoring this situation. We are in close communication with them. That is the number one priority. People need access to health care, affordable care, and providers need to be paid. The second is we're reviewing everything, and we are actively seeking information from steward, lenders, anyone who is involved in this crisis, gathering all of that information, and as you know, that takes time. We will review that, and we will proceed as quickly as we can with any level of accountability, but we need time for that, and we have time for that. And I want folks to know we take that very seriously, and that we will come back to the public after that assessment, after that review, and let them know how we're going to proceed on the accountability front. It's similar to Milton. We had to do our job internally. We put the complaint out publicly today, and so now I can say more than I could say a week ago. We'll do the same when it comes to Stewart.
You know, just one last thing on Stewart. You know, Brian McGrory did great reporting about the company planes, and then, of course, the private yachts owned by the guy that runs the place, Gilatori. But he got the flight document. It shows that these planes owned by the company were going to places like St. Kitts and the French Riviera and places like that. Do you think they were going there to get medical equipment, or do you think they might have been going on vacation?
Who knows? But, you know, the public is not stupid, so I'll let the public make
What was
their
your
own,
reaction to
own
those
assessment.
stories? As a citizen?
All these stories are horrific.
Okay.
The story about the woman who died after
39 years old,
childbirth,
yeah.
as a mother of 2 young kids, you hold your baby, and what the husband and family went through is absolutely, I mean, I shed tears. It was painful to read. So we know that this crisis didn't happen by accident. The question is, how did we get here, and how do we hold folks accountable under our existing laws? And we will do that. And I want the public to know that. I obviously inherited this situation, so we are in the weeds. I'm more in the weeds on this because I inherited it, and, you know, looking back and looking forward, we will do what's necessary.
You know, the person you inherited from is going to be here at noon if you need to talk
Yes,
to her.
I was with the governor last night. We were tag teaming everything related to getting Biden reelected, and Harris as well. So we stay in communication and trying to solve these issues.
Very quick Stewart things, then we will get to the calls. Do you agree with the governor that they should stop doing business? They should get out of Massachusetts?
We'll follow their lead. I will say Health and Human Services, DPH, the governor, they're the ones who lead our response in terms of what we're going to do with the current institutions. We play a role once there are other things at play, maybe a transaction or something else, so we're not there yet. So we're going to continue to work with HHS and make sure folks have access to health care.
Last question, would it be legal, could the state bar for-profit hospitals in general from doing business in Massachusetts?
Well, I will say what's definitely on the longer list of the accountability conversation and how we don't get back to this place going forward is looking at the role that private equity plays in the delivery of healthcare system, not just for a steward. We have our Medicaid fraud unit that is actively also looking into this based on what they're seeing in terms of the quality of care. So this is sort of a more long-term policy issue, also on the list for us to explore and discuss further.
Rick in the truck, you're first with the Attorney General, Andrea Joy Campbell. Welcome.
Rick in the truck?
In the truck. That's
Hello,
correct.
Rick.
Hey, Rick.
Yes, I am out. Thank you for taking my call. So, Mr. Attorney General, my question is, my wife and I are going through IVF treatment right now. And I heard Jim and Marjorie talking last week about the Alabama case, and one of them mentioned that IVF is covered by insurance in Massachusetts. Unfortunately, the first attempt failed, and we are going at it again, but insurance hasn't paid anything. I don't know if there's criteria. We are at Mass General, and I tried to look it up online, and all I got was an ice cream headache. So I didn't know, ma'am, if you have any thoughts, or is it like if you're too old, is there any criteria I'm missing?
So, Rick, because it's a personal nature, first of all, thank you for calling in and highlighting a critical issue and being vulnerable and sharing. I'm going to ask you to stay on with Lauren from my team, Lauren Zoe from my team, to make sure that we can get your contact and information and also follow up with you on specifics related to what you and your wife are going through. But one thing I do want to say is we're obviously following what is happening in Alabama. It is outrageous. It is egregious. We have some of the most progressive laws when it comes to reproductive health care, including IVF, and we fully support it. We support couples who want to have children through this process, and we, of course, will continue to enforce our laws. But I think it's a reminder to everyone that this conversation just isn't about access to abortion. It is about maternal health, IVF, ways in which anyone choose how and when they choose to parent. And these right-wing leftists, and in this case, the judiciary, have one clear mission, which is to, at the end of the day, declare fetuses as people, which is going to stand in the way of us affording folks the reproductive justice they care about. So we are working actively on these issues nationally. And then here in Massachusetts, we want to support Rick and others. So please don't hesitate to reach out to our office.
I thought, though, that that was
Excuse
the
me
law
one
of the
second. I
land.
don't want Rick to hang up. Just
Yeah.
make sure, Rick, we're going to put you on hold and get your information and
Yes.
pass it along.
Thank you,
Because
Rick.
I
I'm sorry,
thought that
Marjorie.
that was state law that insurance companies had to cover IVF treatment in Massachusetts. So it's odd that his insurance company's not doing that.
Well, I don't know who his insurance company is.
Yeah.
I don't know the details, but one thing we do well when people call in here is we follow up and look at their individual case and then navigate that through our consumer specialists and other team members as well.
Here's a text from, she doesn't sign it, but I was laid off at the end of January, applied for unemployment benefits. It's been impossible to reach a person over the phone to answer a question about why my claim was denied. The recording says to call back later in the week when demand is typically lower, then the line disconnects. This is emotionally crushing, very distressing, as I've been unemployed for a month now with no benefits, a mortgage, student loan payments, a 9-year-old son. My salary was $90,000. Why is it so difficult to speak with someone in mass unemployment?
Okay. Did that person give their name?
No, but I got the phone number.
Can we take down their phone number?
Yep.
And if they want to share their name with you, we can then get it to our team. We'll follow up. We can navigate that state agency. But the person also mentioned student loan debt, which we are at the forefront of that work. That is directly within our wheelhouse to help folks do away with their student loan debt. And really proud of our team. We just put up some ads on the T and other places to get folks to know that we are the student loan ombudsman for the state. And we are helping folks, folks are calling in and saying, thank you for helping me wipe out $120,000 of student loan debt. I met a woman whose student loan debt was over $400,000. So we are actively working on that. And so I mention it because we might be able to be helpful to this constituent. But to others who are listening, if you're carrying student loan debt, and especially if you work in public service, you're a teacher, government employee, you're probably eligible for some significant relief. So I encourage folks to also reach out to our office as well. And check out our website on that.
We have Daryl at the Boston Public Library. Mike, he lives in Milton. He wants to talk to the Attorney General. Here
Hey,
he comes.
Daryl, welcome.
Hi, Daryl.
Hi, Daryl.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I love living in this Commonwealth, in this state, and a lot of it is because of who we have running it, and I really appreciate it. I live in Milton. My wife and I were yes votes.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for putting out, doing a law. And I don't understand. I'm not part of the governing body. I couldn't really do that. I don't have the temperament. But I just don't understand how we can fight. And personally, I know this isn't a very big question, but I don't want my tax dollars. I'd rather have them going to all these other programs that I truly believe in. Mm-hmm. I don't want them going to fighting the Commonwealth. Mm-hmm. How do we yes voters say no, thank you? You people that voted no. Well, then you guys fund it. Fund the fight. Mm-hmm. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Daryl, and your wife. And I have to give Tom Callahan and others who organized the Yes Coalition a lot of great work, and people were deeply disappointed. And of course, it creates division in a community. So a few things. One, many of the folks making these decisions at the local level are elected. And there are folks we remain in communication with who are working really hard to bring the town into compliance and to make sure that Milton is delivering housing that is reasonable and affordable for folks, as is every other municipality, especially because they have public transit as a good. And they border Quincy and Boston that are also coming into compliance. And the sad part is you have a small subset sort of driving a narrative in a community. And I think there's an opportunity to push back on that narrative when you talk about who is this housing for. You know, it's for seniors, elders who can't afford to live here. It's for young couples who want to start a family. It's for public employees. That's what we're talking about. And so I think it's one, pushing back on a narrative. The other piece that I think is really important is the town doing an evaluation. It's not just legal cost. The governor has already said that they're going to follow through with them not receiving certain public funds. We've made that crystal clear along the way, what was at risk here and what the threat was. So we hope that Milton will take a different direction post this lawsuit and not continue to waste time, frankly, but to come into compliance. And I'll just add, over the last year, the government, the state agency gave them, housing state agency gave them resources for in various grants to allow them to bring in someone to help them navigate this process, to develop a plan, to offer technical assistance. And they developed that along the way, primarily the select board. And they developed that along the way.
Well, they voted for it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they had resources from the state to develop a plan. So there is a plan there. It's just a small group of folks who are looking for, I think, NIMBYism and maybe other reasons. I'm not entirely sure. That they don't want certain housing in their community.
With all due respect, it was not, I mean, you keep saying a small group of people. It was a huge no vote in Milton. I mean, thousands and thousands of people voted against this thing, correct?
Thousands, but even then, not the entire town, the turnout, right? And there was a large side on the yes side. So yes, there are people who voted. But at the end of the day, when people go out and vote on something and are giving information, you still need folks to lead something and to be communicating. I'm not entirely sure what the no folks were saying to some people. I know what the yes folks were saying because they had more mailers and organizing. Who knows what the narrative was to some no folks? I don't know. I do know NIMBYism plays a role in some of these conversations. And so we have an obligation, not necessarily to dwell on the pros and cons of each side, but as a chief law enforcement officer to enforce the law as it currently exists. And it's crystal clear, it's a mandatory obligation, and we're going to enforce it.
Quickly, do you have any indication from any of the 130 or whatever's left, any of them who are indicating they plan to follow Milton's lead or no?
No.
Okay. You yesterday, I think it was yesterday, introduced a strategic plan for your office. You're nodding in agreement. I'm not quite sure what it is. Could you give us the highlights of
You didn't
what's
read
in
my plan?
I did read it, but I was very tired. It was late at night, and I just can't remember every detail.
Really? Okay. Well, I will say, year one, I'm obviously in year two. I love my job, and I work with an incredible team of dedicated lawyers and staff. So in year one, we all put our heads down across all of our offices, not just Boston, but our Springfield office, our New Bedford office, and Worcester, to develop a strategic plan. We could focus on a whole host of things. So how do you narrow the focus? I'm proud of this plan. In it, we talk about the tools of the office. Folks will say, oh, what are your tools? They are significant. Of course, litigation, as demonstrated by the Milton lawsuit, but policy and government, showing up at the State House to take positions on major policy initiatives, including in the housing context, the criminal legal reform context, juvenile justice context, our grant-making tool. Significant. We have millions of dollars where we can design grants and put them into community. We did that with, for example, our maternal health grant, $1.5 million we put out there to community-based organizations to continue to close those gaps. We did one in the migrant crisis to support legal aid organizations on the ground that are doing remarkable work but needed greater funding. That's a significant tool. And then the last is our community engagement and outreach and training tool. So we want folks to be aware that all those tools exist in our office, and we're going to maximize them fully and treat them all with all the same, in the sense that the litigation tool won't overrule the others. But then we also said, what are the issues we're going to focus on? Number one was absolutely everything having to do with affordability and economics. We heard loud and clear, housing is too expensive, food, health care, child care. If you're an elder trying to go into an assisted living place, everything is too expensive. The AG's office has significant tools to deal with those affordability issues. Consumer justice is a major focus of the plan in the office. And so we're going to continue to move that forward. The other pillar in the plan is supporting our young people, and not just in word, but in action. I'm an AG, but I'm a mother of 2 young boys. We have a mental health crisis, an epidemic in this country, in this state. So how do we expand access to behavioral health services? We can do that in some creative ways. How do we also hold folks accountable? We filed a lawsuit against Meta and Instagram for the role they're playing. And then one other piece I will mention, sort of another pillar, is absolutely looking at public safety and public health. We are taking guns and drugs off the street every day. Folks know that brand of the work, and our state police unit is working really hard with our Crim Bureau. But how do we look at these issues through a public health lens? Usually where incidents of crime are happening, it's poor housing stock or lack of housing. It's environmental injustice going on, toxic communities, poor schooling and poor educational outcomes. It's where the scams that we're seeing are on the rise. And so we're connecting this public health and public safety, saying they are one and the same. And so those are just 3 pillars. There are 5, but you got to read the plan. So I encourage everyone who is here and listening to follow us at Mass AGO if you're on social media. We have released a plan in several languages: Spanish, Portuguese, Haitian Creole, Chinese, Vietnamese. We want to be accessible. So I encourage folks to read it and then frankly think about what you're going to do to engage with us to implement the plan. It's a strategic plan. It's not an implementation plan. We want it to be bottom up. We wanted to do it with residents. So follow us on social media at Mass AGO.
We're talking to the Attorney General of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Andrea Joy Campbell. Sarah in the car. You're on with the Attorney General.
Rick in the truck, Sarah in the car.
That's
Thank
right.
you all. I hope
That's how
you're
it
all,
works here.
and I hope you're pulled over.
Yeah,
Hi,
that's
Sarah.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
As you're dialing.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi,
Hi,
Sarah.
Attorney General. Thank you. Hi, thank you for taking my call. My question relates to the 2016 ballot question, the Act to Prevent Cruelty to Farm Animals. So, in the last 2 years, cage-free eggs are required to be sold in Massachusetts, and as of last year, whole muscle pork had to be within the Q3 requirements. Now, I work for a wholesale food distributor based in Massachusetts. We sell to hospitals, schools, restaurants, etc. And folks on the ground are saying that nobody is enforcing this law. So now national distributors are starting to sell meats that are not in eggs that are not in compliance. Who's
Sarah,
in
hey,
charge of-
Sarah, yeah, your connection's horrible, so if you don't mind asking the question, it'd be great.
Who's in charge of enforcing this law?
Thank you, Sarah.
So we are, and we actually just got a recent decision in this case. We are in active litigation on this case. And so actually, Sarah, it may not be a bad idea, since you're in the car, if you wanted to stay on, we can give you an update on where we are with that litigation, but we are. Similar to right to repair, for example, people are challenging our laws or our certifications of certain ballot initiatives. But we actually, I think, had a really good victory in this recent decision. It may be appealed, so just if you want to stay on, Sarah, we are actively proceeding. If we could implement the law immediately, we would, but people are challenging provisions of it. But it was a good decision, I think, recently, and so it's ongoing. But if you want to stay on, we can absolutely share some more, and then maybe actually would be helpful is you can share that with some folks in your network.
Sarah,
Yeah.
don't go away. We're going to put you on hold. Please give your contact information to our colleague.
Speaking of right to repair, I know that Senator Elizabeth Warren and some other people have been very concerned about why it's taking so long. I think the ballot question was in 2020 on right to repair. It was an overwhelming win. What is holding that up?
Nothing at this stage. It is the law of Massachusetts. It obviously took a little bit of time because we had the federal agency, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration,
Right.
put out a letter that almost got in the way of us being able to enforce it. They have since changed that position. The FTC chair was actually recently here. I just met with FTC Chair Khan, who is also following right to repair and working with us. But it is the law of the land, and the law of Massachusetts. So we're encouraging folks, independent repair shops, if they are not receiving the telematics information, to reach out to our office to let us know that. I know Senator Warren and the FTC chair were recently at an auto dealer talking about this issue and the importance of implementing this. It took some time because of challenge, et cetera, but similar to some other laws, we were able to overcome those hurdles, and it's we're enforcing it.
But that's what the Senator Warren and the FTC head Con were upset about. They went out and interviewed these people, I guess, and at the repair shops, and they said the law's not being enforced.
And so we're saying we can't know that, right? So obviously we stay in touch with Senator Warren, FTC chair. We can figure out who, but we encourage anyone, and we said this to the senator and the team as well, where they're not getting the information as required, to reach out to our office.
Okay.
There are steps we can take to ensure compliance. And there are steps they can take too, whether it's filing suits or anything else as well. So we're going to keep pushing it. I also think, communication, how do we get this information out there is really important. I think the last time it was sort of in public view, it was sort of the back and forth between our office and the federal agency. But that's since been worked out, and it is the law of Massachusetts to be enforced.
We have to take a break. Before we do, I believe you told, or my former colleague, the great LaToya Edwards, recently, that what you try to do is take a break in the middle of the day every day. I don't know you that well.
Yeah.
You don't seem like
I
a
like
break
that
in the middle of the
idea.
day kind
I'm
of
with you.
person. So she's laughing nervously if you're not watching.
LaToya.
What do you do in the middle of the day for whatever purpose, reduce your stress, what do you do exactly?
I go for walks.
You do not.
And I
do you really?
And I actually prefer to do it where I'm not in a suit. So I change my clothes, I have my sneakers, I put my clothes on, I go for a walk, and then I come back. And I encourage my team to do the same. It is busy, but fresh air, especially on a day like this, critical for your brain, your mental health. And the work will be there when you get back, but it's really important. And I have actually prioritized my health since taking on this job. I want energy not just for my job, but I want energy for my husband. So when we go on date night, I'm not exhausted. I want energy
like
for my
that.
2 kids. So when Aiden and Alexander want to play, that I can play with them and not be exhausted.
So if your
take
constituents
care
want
of
to ask
ourselves.
you questions while you're on your walk, what route do you take exactly? We're talking to Andrea
I
Joy
do see
Campbell.
some people but most just sort of wave and let me keep walking.
Let's hope
That's
so.
very kind.
But I would suggest that they let me just walk.
Okay.
And then call the office. And maybe if we walk, we talk about something not related to work.
Got it.
That's also
I
important.
think that's a great idea, Jim. What do you think?
Well, we have a show
important.
11 to 2, Marjorie. It's a little tough.
So you
know
have
what
to
I
go
mean?
before.
Why don't you just
That's
take a
right.
walk and see?
Before or after?
Okay.
We're talking with Attorney General Andrea Joy Campbell. She's going to be with us till the top of the hour. You can reach her at 877-301-8970. We'll try to get to as many calls and texts as we can. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We're live at the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com and facebook.com/GBH News. Starting next Wednesday, 3 days a week here at the library, And in exactly 25 minutes, the governor will join us for an hour of Ask the Governor. But now, for the rest of this hour, we continue to be joined by the Attorney General, Andrea Joy Campbell. To reach her, lines are full, but you can text at 877-301-8970 or approach Hannah, our colleague, somewhere over there, if you want to ask a question from the audience.
Ann in Boston, thank you for calling. You're on with the Attorney General.
Hi, Ann. Ann.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. There's been a lot of news coverage regarding the Norfolk VA, Michael Morrissey's questionable bias investigations, and I'm just wondering, why does your office still stand behind their decision in the murder of Justin Root by Boston police, given all that has come to light recently regarding their patented practices?
Thank you, Ann. Talking about Justin Root and that situation. Ann, thanks for the call.
So we are obviously in touch with Justin Root's family, his sister, his dad. We did a full evaluation of this and shared with his sister our result. If anything, it was actually reviewed by my predecessor and I know DA Rollins, I think at the time, and others, and decided that there's nothing that sort of we can do here. I will just stress, though, I am mindful, and it is wrong for someone to die at the hands of a governmental agency and actor. And we made it crystal clear to the family that we don't have what it would take to be successful here. And so what we did do is stress that I inherited decisions that were made previous in this matter. So there's not much I can do to change that. But we established a police accountability unit because we understand how significant these cases are, and there is a role for our office to play. We actually didn't have, I think, the human capital and resources we needed to do it very seriously because we just got the unit off the ground. So going forward, we're telling folks and there are others who have lost their loved ones in a police-involved incident, where we're saying we're going to need to learn from you what the process was for you, how you did not get the accountability and justice you care about, and to make sure that that doesn't happen as we take on new cases of this vein. And then personally, I will just stress.
Could you explain who he was for people that don't know?
So he was a son, a brother of someone who was killed. And it involved two different counties, two different police agencies. It was reviewed by district attorneys, the AG's office previously. But someone who is obviously involved in a police-involved shooting.
Okay.
And there were others, of course, and you have a family seeking some justice and accountability. Difficult when decisions were made previous, and you go to a court sometimes and them overturning a previous decision, good luck. Extremely difficult and challenging to do. So going forward, we're going to take on these cases seriously, hence why we established the Police Accountability Unit. But one piece I wanted to just mention, because I think sometimes people forget, my twin brother Andre died 12 years ago, and not to suggest it's the same circumstances as Justin's case or others, but where I have significant compassion for these types of cases is Andre died while in the custody of the Department of Correction, pretrial detainee, lack of health care, 29 years old. There was no justice or accountability whatsoever for my family. My family still doesn't even know fully the circumstances under which he died. We sought information and got information that was painful to read, and was never able to hold anyone accountable because just how difficult it is to do it. In this case, the legal standard is challenging, the amount of resources you need, it drags on and on. So I stress that because I get my role and responsibility in ensuring folks have access to justice and accountability, particularly in these types of cases when a governmental agency is active and involved. And then I will just use it as an opportunity to say one more point. In our strategic plan, I talked about 3 other themes. Government accountability is one other theme. We have 5. This is a 4th one that is really important. We're going to prioritize public corruption, misappropriation of funds, wrongful convictions. All of these things are top of mind and going to be a part of the work. So I appreciate Ann calling in. And we remain in touch, of course, with his family.
I'm going to try to connect a couple of topics you've mentioned. Young people, and we talked about for-profit entities in the case of Stewart. You oversee public charities in your role as Attorney General. White Stadium, we've talked to the mayor quite a bit about this, is about to make a deal with a for-profit entity, a private entity, to allow them to use that stadium for a huge percentage of time, during which time members of the public would not be able to. On the flip side, they're contributing a lot of money. I think 30 million, I think from them, 50 million from the city. I may have it backwards. But some people consider this to be sort of like a hijacking of public space by the private sector.
It's kids'
What do you-
football teams.
Right.
Boston
High
Public
school teams,
School
yeah.
kids' football teams.
So what do you think about this, and do you have a role in overseeing this transaction?
Well, right now we don't have a role. The city of Boston, it's a parcel, if I remember correctly, it's owned by the city of Boston, and the mayor obviously has had conversations to pursue her plans with respect to this development. And I think in media accounts that I've read, we'll continue to use pieces of it for youth sports and youth programming, particularly for Boston Public School students. But the other piece is obviously there's now a lawsuit against them. I think my former colleague is involved. A.G. Hochbarger is on that side. So it was presented to us. We are in due diligence mode, learning as much. We frankly learned more of it via the media reports versus other conversations. But as of right now, we don't have a role to play, but we're getting more information.
You know, one thing you do have a role to play in, because you wrote a piece with Michelle Wu about this, banning these third-party electric suppliers. I think these people call constantly, and they're very aggressive, but it turns out you're not getting a great deal. So tell us about your objections to them.
Competitive electric supply is a significant issue. Talk about economics and affordability. I'm proud of the partnership with Mayor Wu, along with Rep. Moran and Senator Crichton, who also are spearheading this work. My office has received, I would say, thousands of calls from constituents over the years who have been sold a product, competitive electric supply, for their individual home. And after they sign the contract, maybe in month one, they'll realize the savings, but then post that, they're realizing losses. And in some places where you live in a community and you have actually municipal aggregation, your bills are higher than if you were in the municipal program. And so we have done a deep dive on this issue and realized that our constituent work to try to get folks their money back, we'll continue that. We've actually sued some of these providers because of the losses and the unfair market practices of door-to-door selling, aggressive selling, and certain things that they're doing to get people to sign these contracts, to hold them accountable. And when we get some level of accountability and we win, they file bankruptcy, so we actually can't get the resources to provide restitution. So we have taken a very dramatic step, which we recognize as dramatic, which is to use our policy and government tool to show up at the State House with legislation filed by me, but also with Rep. Moran and Senator Crichton, to push the State House, both the House and the Senate, to pass legislation banning the competitive supply market for individual residential households. They can continue their commercial work, they're doing just fine, but on the individual side, they have afforded no one any wins. It is significant losses, and I'm talking about losses that over $500 million. It is not working, and we cannot keep up with the complaints, and so we're telling the legislature, you have to do your part, and these people have to go. There's a back and forth right now on possibly introducing more laws to regulate this industry, and I am saying that is a total waste of time. They don't need more laws. They are not in compliance with the laws we currently have. They need to be banned fully from this market, and they target communities of color and poor communities. They know exactly what they're doing. They're showing up in places where they can not only target folks, but also get them to sign these contracts, take full advantage of folks in certain communities, and not afford them any wins, but instead bring about significant losses and disparities in what folks pay for their utilities versus others.
You and Mayor Wu wrote at the end of your piece that Governor Baker supported the ban, that Governor Healy supports the ban, which I assume means it'll never go anywhere in the legislature. I mean, what do you have any sense about what? I mean, this seems to be such a slam dunk, and
It is a slam dunk.
So why
It's
are
an
they not
economic
moving
justice
this
issue.
expeditiously?
I think they are. We are staying in contact with the chairman on the House side as well as on the Senate side, and trying to push this through and saying, yes, we understand we're taking a piece of their market away, and we don't do that lightly, but they have demonstrated year after year that they're not going to bring about losses. Let's continue to push municipal aggregation, for example. And the other piece I want to stress is, if we don't do this and get this right, we will be back here in a year or two probably talking about $1 billion in losses, and for poor people and people of color. And I've yet to get a response on, If you pass more laws, for example, to regulate this industry, what are you going to do to help those communities and residents of color in those poor communities right now who are being targeted? And so for me, it's crystal clear. It is, of course, for the mayor who sees it in Boston. It's also clear for Rep. Moran, who's obviously Lawrence and other communities, Senator Crichton, the same thing. And it is painful to get these calls when you know that you can't deliver the justice they deserve for the consumer protection we say we care about so deeply.
Judy and JP, Jamaica Plain, you're on with the Attorney General, Andrea Joy Campbell. Hey.
Judy. Hi, Judy.
Hi. First time, long time. Love you guys.
Thanks.
Good to be talking to you, Attorney General. I'm calling because I'm wondering if it's possible, or if it already exists, a law that if corporations do business with customers, that there has to be an availability of a human to speak with. I'm saying this.
Go for it, Judy.
Great
my
question.
mortgage was sold because my mortgage company went belly up. And now I have an important question to ask my mortgage company, and I've called a number of times the past couple of weeks, and I get stuck in automation. And there's significant problems I need to deal with, but I can't get a human.
So, one, I think you should stay on the line to help us navigate contacting the mortgage company in that specific case for you and with you. We would love to be as helpful as we can. I don't know that we're going to go out and pass a law to get humans, but I will say we are actively looking at AI and machine learning. Actually brought back a lawyer who used to work in the office, Stephanie Lavelle, wooed her back. She was actually the first black woman to serve as first assistant, which was a major deal in the AG's office. And she is taking the lead on helping us develop a framework for AI and machine learning. There are benefits to it, but there are also risks. AI, for example, it can be helpful with big, huge discovery in cases, and but it's also at risk for discrimination, of course, bias, and then the very thing you just described. So we're looking at what those risks are, and I think we'll find ways to develop it. I don't know that we will pass a law here, but we will help you hopefully navigate the mortgage issue and continue to have more information on the AI machine learning piece. And I will just tell folks, if you are not paying attention to anything related to AI and machine learning, you should. It shows up in our life, frankly, every day, as just described. If it is a robot that is speaking to you, that is technology, so you are interacting every day. But there are some significant risks as you introduce new technology, and our office is really looking at what those risks are to address them.
Judy,
so thank you, Judy.
Don't go away. We're going to take your contact information and give it to the Attorney General's office, so stick around if you would.
I was just looking, lots of people are concerned that they can't find anybody to talk to anywhere. No one is.
And I just, I still have to call people too. I still have a family and things to address, and you were on hold for 45 minutes, and it's like, are you kidding me? But at least there are companies now, they can say, will you leave your number and someone will call you back, so you're not sitting on hold. So, we can encourage companies.
Why couldn't you pass a law that says within X number of minutes, if you want to do business in the Commonwealth, a human has to be available?
Especially for older people. A lot of people are older. They're calling it that.
That's right. I mean, you
Medicare.
could pass a law for a lot of things, but this is why we have our strategic plan, Jim, that you're going to read later on.
I read it last night. I did.
So that we can focus our energy and limited resources, right, on passing things that will make a big difference. And I will say, we're working with the corporate community, private sector all the time on just ways they can improve customer service generally. This could be one.
Lucy in Worcester, you're on Boston Public Radio with the Attorney General. Welcome.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for taking my call, Attorney General.
Oops, sorry. Yep.
I need some assistance navigating when a patient feels they've been treated to unethical business, dental practices.
I'm sorry, Lucy, say that again.
Dental.
You broke up, at least in my earpiece here, or headphones.
Oh.
Say it again, Lucy, please.
I've been to an ethical dentist.
Unethical dentist.
And you want to know what to do about it?
Yes.
You need to call us.
Correct.
And I will.
I did. I filed.
Okay.
I filed last Thursday, but
Okay. So
I've noticed this is a widespread issue, especially here in Worcester County. I posted on the Nextdoor group. I now have a list of 5 dental companies that have been trying to pull these same shady tactics that they did with me. So is there any advice that I can give these other people that are going through the same thing that I am, other than just
Can you stay on,
submitting?
Lucy? Can you stay on so we can obviously discuss what you submitted with Lauren from my incredible team? So stay on. We can discuss specifics with you. But why I appreciate the call is just this morning with my Medicaid fraud unit, that is not only focused on elder care and long-term care facilities, but if you receive mass health dollars or public dollars, holding folks accountable. And they're doing significant work when it comes to some dentists who are not, or who are either billing inappropriately to our state health system, seeking resources inappropriately. So they take on fraud, of course, in these systems as well. So I mention it because it is a major issue, possibly in certain parts of the state, but this unit is on top of it. So do stay on with us, Lucy.
Lucy, we're going to put you on hold. Same deal. We'll take your contact info and give it to the Attorney General's office.
Attorney General John from Nantucket wants to know if the Attorney General has her kids call her General.
Hello, John. Absolutely not. Even if I see neighbors at the grocery store, and if someone calls me General, please don't do that. It's really strange.
Okay.
But obviously, in the role and the title, I understand that. I think more folks say AG than General. It's usually the elder generation that says General.
Yeah.
You know, we only have a minute or so left, and you mentioned
Thank
last
you,
night
John.
you were with the Attorney General, with the governor talking. Helping Joe Biden get reelected. There's a poll out this morning that shows, out of Harvard, by the way, 11 points underwater is Joe Biden, a net positive for a guy who's been found liable for rape, for $500 million of fraud, has
That's
91 felony counts. I don't want your comment respectfully on Trump. What do you make of the fact that an overwhelming percentage of the American public is not only satisfied, but enthusiastic about a man with that description being the next president of the United States?
I stay in touch with AGs across the country, and we have been having conversations about we have to do everything in our power to reelect Biden and Harris. It's just not an option. The rule of law is at stake. Reproductive justice is at stake. If you care about affordability and these issues and job creation, that's at stake. They are delivering millions of dollars, and the governor, I'm sure, will speak to this, not only for infrastructure projects, but they're creating jobs, they're lowering prescription costs for seniors, capping insulin costs. The other piece that is really important, if you care about basic love and decency and an administration that's going to push back against hate and white supremacy, the list could go on and on. I could be here for another hour talking about Biden and Harris. That's an easy question. And white supremacy is on the rise even here in Massachusetts. We filed a lawsuit against a neo-Nazi group, NSC 131, that is operating right here in Massachusetts, founded in Massachusetts. And the New Hampshire Attorney General, who's Republican, filed a lawsuit for their behavior there to say hate is unacceptable. So it is active here. And so if you want us to have partners, and let me tell you all the things I just described in this interview, I can't do it if you don't have Biden and Harris reelected. So everyone has to do their part. No one is perfect, but they're doing the best thing they can, and the other option is just not okay.
Thank you, Attorney General.
Thank you very, very much for coming in today.
We'd like to continue, but we know she has to take a walk.
That's
so
right.
obviously we have to let her go.
Be sure to vote next week in the presidential primary, which is really important too.
March 5th, that's
Okay,
right.
coming
Thank
up
you all.
next,
Thank
after
you,
the noon
Attorney
news,
General.
we're going to be joined by Governor Maura Healey. She joins us for a monthly edition of Ask the Governor. Sorry we couldn't get to all the phone calls and very few of the texts, but we did the best we could. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News. Maura Healey is next.
I think it's crystal clear to everyone, including folks in Milton, that we are in a housing crisis, and that doesn't just affect someone's ability to have shelter and to be safe. It affects our economy, our workforce. Housing is one critical tool to build wealth. It allows us to close the racial wealth gap. You name it, it is significant.
Houston Browdy, I am Marjorie Yeagan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Hi, Marjorie.
Hello, Jim.
And starting next Wednesday, Marjorie meant to say, what happens next Wednesday,
Next Wednesday, we're going to be here. Well, next week, we're going to be here. A week from tomorrow, we're going to start coming 3 days a week, basically. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday.
That would be correct.
That would be correct.
We're joined now at the library by Governor Maura Healey for a monthly Ask the Governor segment. If you want to call her, the lines are full already, but they will open up. You can always text her at the same number, 877-301-8970. Our colleague Hannah is sitting over there at the little table to the right. If you have a question you'd like to ask the governor face-to-face, run it by Hannah. Governor Healey, thank you so much for coming. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Jim and Marjorie.
Yeah, thank you very much, Governor, for being here. As always, I wanted to start. You played basketball all your life. You played basketball at Harvard. There was a story, two stories are kind of linked. You issued a statement about this Next Benedict, this person who was a non-binary person who was in a fight in a girl's bathroom in Oklahoma and later died. You issued a statement about that. And then we have a kind of a local story, not involving a binary person, but a non-binary person, but a transgender player on a basketball team, this girls' basketball team between two schools, Collegiate Charter School of Lowell and Kipp Academy of Lynn, was stopped at halftime because of some interaction between the girls' players and a transgender player on the team. It seems like this non-binary transgender stuff, not just in Oklahoma, it's here.
I think those are two separate issues. With respect to what happened in a basketball game, I haven't seen the clip. I really haven't read the whole story there, so I don't know. But what I do know is that what happened in Oklahoma is that the Oklahoma governor supported and signed into law a law that prevents people from using the bathroom of their choice. And, you know, we have a different public accommodation law here, and our LGBT kids are protected in schools and elsewhere. And, you know, it sickens me. It makes me so sad, you know, and to listen to the grandmother of Next Benedict speak about them. And they were a straight A student. They were doing everything right. And can you imagine? You're 16 years old and you're savagely beaten to the point of death. I mean, it's just so wrong. And my heart goes out to trans kids across this country, to their families. Know that in Massachusetts, you are seen, you are loved, you are respected, and you are protected under the law. And I can say that unequivocally.
We're talking to Maura Healey, the governor of the Commonwealth. Speaking of life and death, can we spend a couple of minutes on that which we spent a couple of minutes with the Attorney General in the first hour, the mess at Stewart Healthcare. You've said quite unequivocally you didn't use the word hell. I was going to say get the hell out of the state. Let's assume they do. What happens?
Well, them getting out of state is just a short way of saying we need them to stop operating and running these hospitals and have that taken over by new entities. And that's what we are working on, and our Secretary of Health and Human Services is working on and has been for several weeks. I mean, the story of Steward, it's really a story of greed. And what happened here is that Steward came to town many years ago. It was one of the first entrants of a for-profit entity into our healthcare space, which is new because most of our hospitals in Massachusetts are not-for-profits. And they took over the Caritas system, which is a system that provides a lot of care, particularly in vulnerable communities, lower-income communities. And then it appears that the CEO and management essentially proceeded to strip the Steward entity of real assets and leveraged it up with boatloads of debt. Boy, and here we are in the situation. I'm focused on protecting patients, protecting 16,000 jobs at issue here, and protecting the stability of the healthcare system. And we continue to work on that every day in what we hope to be an orderly transition. But it's a situation that the selfishness and greed of Steward and its management and its CEO created. And my job is to focus and keep our eyes on the ball in terms of taking care of business right now and cleaning up the mess that they created.
If we can stay on this for a few minutes. I know when you were Attorney General, you were fighting with them to get them to do required financial disclosure, which they didn't do. They were fined some. Recently, they say they disgorged tons of stuff and they're in compliance. You say they're not in compliance. In a couple of questions about that without getting lost in the weeds is, what are you not getting that you think is critical? And of that which you are getting, do we know how much the CEO, De La Torre, he of 2 yachts and 2 private jets, they're company jets, I don't know how to pronounce it, Cerebus or whatever the private equity firm is. Do we know how much they've pulled out of this company and the financial information they have disclosed?
Not entirely, but it's not rocket science, and you don't need an accountant to do the math here. I mean, the guy's got 2 yachts valued at an estimated $100 million, a couple of planes, a ranch in Costa Rica. Mind you, I'm supposing here, that money came directly what he took from what he took out of the Steward healthcare system. So, it sickens me, it bothers me, but there will be accountability, and others can speak to that. My job, though, as governor, is to make sure that we are shoring up what we need to do here to protect patients, to protect providers, and to protect the stability of the healthcare system. In terms of information, this is part of the problem, right? And what we have talked about for a long time. They fought, our hospitals, you're required by law to provide financial information, which is important because we're trying to keep an eye on the stability and the financial health of these companies, which, these are companies, these are organizations that provide a critically important service, health care, right? So we need to have that information. It was Steward who actually went to court years ago to fight turning that information over. As Attorney General, I took them on. We won. They then proceeded to appeal. So it's on appeal. The information they provided, it's whatever. It's some information, of course, but we don't have audited financial statements, which I think speaks to exactly what's wrong here. If you don't have audited financial statements, that's because somebody's refusing to certify that they've been audited, or you haven't been doing the proper bookkeeping to begin with. Either way, it's a problem. But we're continuing to have conversations with all interested parties to work on an orderly transition of these systems.
Would you be upset if another for-profit took over these hospitals?
No. What we want to do, though, is make sure that the entity taking over these hospitals is going to do right by patients and do right by workers.
Joan Bernanke's got the Globe columnist got a great question in her piece about this, saying, can the state stop De La Torre with the guy with the 2 yachts, 190-foot and a 90-foot fishing boat? Can the state stop him from selling to another for-profit entity and making even more money? And which of the hospitals will have to close?
Yeah. Well, this is all what's happening right now, and I think it's caught up with him as CEO, and it's somewhat out of his control right now, as it should be, because now adults have come into the room and people who are responsible, and we're all working together to try to sort that out. I've said from the beginning that not one dime should go to Stewart or its CEO or its management. We've got to focus resources and attention on shoring up the stability of those facilities and making sure that our communities are served.
I have one last question. You were asked the other day if you thought there might have been some crimes, and you said there's a chance there might be. We asked the Attorney General this too. I'm asking this not as a former lawyer, but as a layperson. When the objective facts that we know, thanks to Brian McGrory and other reporting, is that the company decided it was an appropriate expenditure to buy 2 jets to go to mostly vacation sort of
French Riviera,
locations and that sort of thing. At the same time, we all read the incredibly painful story in the Globe, just one instance that we know of, where a woman died because when they went to get the equipment that would have saved her life in all likelihood, it had been repossessed. Isn't that on its face criminal behavior by the people in charge, Governor?
Well, it certainly raises a lot of questions, and it raises any number of questions about the lawfulness of actions. And there will be others, state and federal law enforcement, who have the expertise and the capacity to address that. That's not my job as governor. But certainly just knowing that, and also knowing, what happened here, where, again, Stewart came in. They had these entities, right? They took over these entities that were operating in communities around the state. They then proceeded to sell the buildings and the land to these private equity concerns and lenders. And then those guys actually leased back the building and the land to Stewart, and Stewart paid rent. It's a real question about whether that was the right rent or whether that was overvalued. And with that money, we know then money went out to Ralph De La Torre, okay? So you don't have to be a lawyer to have real questions about what happened. That'll be for others to sort out. I've got to keep my eye focused, Jim, on how do we protect patients, how do we protect 16,000 jobs, and how do we protect communities and the stability of a healthcare system that is already experiencing strain. One of the things that we're really focused on is workforce. How do we get the workforce into our hospitals so that we can deal with some of the capacity challenges? What are we needing to do here? It's one of the reasons I've leaned so hard into workforce this year through the budget and other investments. But that's what we're focused on right now.
Jim mentioned the young mother that died had to be transferred at midnight to Boston Medical Center when she was in extreme.
Well, this is a hospital system that, again, not only has put patients and workers at risk, has also seems to have had a pattern of stiffing suppliers and vendors. So that matter is under investigation. We'll see what comes of it. But suffice it to say, there are any numbers of suppliers and vendors who haven't had their bills paid by Stewart. There's a lot of litigation on right now about that. I can tell you that our State Department of Public Health is on site at these facilities. We expect Stewart's full cooperation in safe staffing levels and also complying with our monitoring there. But we're going to continue to stay right on this.
Well, we had a gentleman text or call, I forget which one, saying he had a colonoscopy scheduled at Stewart, someday last week, and he was wondering if he should go. You mentioned the DPH is on staff there, but what would you tell him? Would you tell him to try to go to Brigham or someplace else?
I encourage people to continue to go to our hospitals, including our Stewart hospitals. And, there are a lot of people working in these places, the staff who are working incredibly hard, hospital administration, management. This is not their problem, okay? They didn't create this. They're dealing with this because they had a selfish, greedy CEO and management team in Dallas, Texas, starving them of the resources and the supplies that they need. So we're there as a partner, on the ground, on site. We do not want people to delay care that they need. So we want them to continue to seek that care. But this is one of these situations where a private for-profit entity came in and did things in a way that was just so wrong and puts communities and people's lives at risk. There will be accountability and there will be a reckoning, no doubt. But in the meantime, my job is to work with others to make sure there's an orderly transition here of this hospital system to other entities.
Jerome in Roxbury, you're on with the Governor of the Commonwealth, Maura Healey. Welcome, Jerome.
Oh, hello, Governor. Hi, Jerome Hazen. In all honesty,
Jerome.
I got to say that I am with that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I sure can.
Okay, hi. In all fairness, I just want to say that I am with XR Boston Extinction Rebellion, and I'm going to keep it just a practical question for you. And I hope you're enjoying the postcards that we have everybody sending in, that you're reading them to take in the full effect of what we're trying to do. But in a car-centered city like Boston, why don't we see more development of electric charging stations that are going to enable the transition into renewable energies as a source of transportation fuel?
Jerome, thanks for the call.
Thanks, Jerome. I can't speak to the city of Boston, as you know, Jerome, but I can tell you as your governor, we are focused statewide on what we're doing around building up electric vehicle charging capacity. I was just in D.C. this past week, meeting with other governors, meeting with the Biden administration, meeting with the Deputy Secretary at the Department of Energy, where we talked about electric vehicle infrastructure. It's something that our Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs is very focused on. We've mapped this, and she's working with our Secretary of Transportation on how we can come up with the funding that we need to deploy appropriate electric vehicle infrastructure. We're proud of the fact that here in Massachusetts, and it's interesting because I'm talking to other colleagues from other states, it's clear to me we're a state that really is leading in terms of the demand for electric vehicles. Now, to satisfy that demand, we need to have those charging stations. And we also need to do things like modernize our grid, build out the substation capacity in order to provide the electricity needed to use those electric vehicles and so much more. So we're really, really focused on this. We continue to chase federal funds for this. I'm proud of the fact that when I took office, I said we were going to compete for every single federal dollar. To date, we've submitted applications that have brought back to the state $3 billion, including some really important funds for climate infrastructure. We are leading among states when it comes to planning and thinking about coastal resilience, resilience generally. And by the way, this week, hopefully you'll see an economic development bond bill filed by my office where we are making a play for Massachusetts to be the global hub of climate tech innovation. We've got the answers right here in Massachusetts to solve our climate needs, and I'm excited about leaning into that as a great economic opportunity.
In a minute, can you give us 30 seconds, if you can, on what this economic development bill is going to look like? But you mentioned energy. We had Azad Ashai, who's the CEO of Nexamp here the other day, with Joe Curtatone, former mayor of, obviously, of Somerville. He said something, we intended to play it, but it's too long. We said, what would you ask the governor? We said you were coming on Tuesday. He said, so for me, it's setting a goal, talking about the importance of solar, then actually working with stakeholders, not just the utility companies, because here in Massachusetts, we have a bad habit when we think of energy policy. Go to the CEO of Eversource and National Grid. What do you say to Ashai?
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I saw him, was with him just a couple weeks ago. So, his space is solar, and we as a state did something that hadn't been done before. We actually mapped the entire state to see where else we could add solar capacity on the tops of buildings, on roadways, everywhere, right? So now we have a plan. We are also competing actively for grants from the Biden administration under a program, Solar for All. We want to get as much as we can in terms of federal dollars to match state dollars. Remember, I'm the first governor to appoint a climate chief. I'm the first to make good on a promise to deliver 1% of our budget to climate, and so we are working on these things. And I think that the point about that Zad is making is an important one. We need to have support at all levels for something like solar to take hold. That means permitting, right? It means the engagement of local communities. Everybody's got to get on board and see the imperative and the opportunity that we have to move more quickly away from fossil fuels to a renewable future. We've got to do that. We've also got to support work around infrastructure. Right now, I'm proud of the fact that there are 30,000 homes in Massachusetts as we speak being powered by Vineyard Wind. That happened, guys. A lot of people doubted it. That happened, and it's just going to grow. It's great. But as we build out offshore wind, what's really important? that we actually have places to deliver that energy on land, right, so that it can get out to our homes and our businesses. And that's why I also need community support for the siting of substations, grid work, other things that will allow the actual delivery of that energy into the grid. So, I just encourage folks to get involved at the community level, because if we see opposition there, then we don't get to where we need to be. It's also why, I want folks to know that we are working regionally. And one of the leadership meetings that I was part of last week was a meeting of all the New England governors to talk about how we can work together on procurements for energy, on the siting of transmission for energy, on reliability for the grid, because while we're all different states, these things don't know state boundaries, right? I mean, we've got hydro coming in, we've got wind coming in, it's going to cross a number of states. So we need to think as a region, and we'll be stronger for it. And I'm looking forward to all that's to come with that. I would like to mention the other couple things on economic development.
Sure.
When is this
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure, go right now.
Okay,
Sure.
so it's only a slightly awkward segue. So economic development, basically, folks, here's the deal. We have a great bond rating here in Massachusetts. Not only do we have a record amount in our rainy day fund, our stabilization fund, our financial footing is strong. Just months ago in April, we received an upgrade from the rating agencies. What that means is that we have an ability to go out and issue bonds and borrow. The thing I'm proposing is an economic development bill that will allow us to go out and issue bonds and borrow to make investments in economic development initiatives for our state. 3 areas. Life sciences. Massachusetts needs to lengthen its lead as the global epicenter for life sciences. The cures, the innovations, the treatments, all of it is here. We need to build on that. 18 of the 20 largest life science companies in the world are in Massachusetts. We want to keep them here. We want them growing here. We want to support young entrepreneurs in this space as well. And by the way, we're going to go chase those other 2 who aren't yet here. Second area, climate tech. I mentioned we've got the opportunity to make Massachusetts the global hub for climate innovation, to power our way through the climate crisis, to develop and pioneer the solutions that not only will address the challenges in this country, but the challenges we face around the world. And the third area is applied AI, okay? AI's here, folks. It's up to us to make sure that it's used responsibly, effectively, and in furtherance of public good. So what we're doing is we're leaning into this as a space. I believe that Massachusetts can be the leader when it comes to applied AI, how we actually use it in healthcare, how we actually use it as we're studying right now to make sure that people with disabilities riding the T have better access to services, how we can better help healthcare workers in hospitals diagnose and treat patients, for example. So many applications, and we've got so many leaders in AI right here in Massachusetts. We're bringing them together, and this will be the third part of that. Finally, for those out there, and we're here at Boston Public Library, we're surrounded by a vibrant creative community and arts community. We're leaning in to our creative economy in our economic development bill. It's an important part of who we are. Also, tourism. I don't need to remind anybody here in Copley Square, but next year, 250th anniversary of Massachusetts and where it all began. And so we're looking forward to that as part of our economic development initiatives as well.
That wasn't that awkward, by the way. But and also, I know what the answer to this is, so I don't know why I'm wasting my time. You have so much big stuff pending before the legislature, from the housing bond bill to this economic development thing, and there are a ton of other things. I'm not going to do my usual and say it's only a few months till the legislature goes on a 5-month vacation. How nervous, I'm serious, how nervous are you on, it's almost March, that a lot of these things just aren't going to get addressed because they go home early?
We're going to get it done. I mean, this is a legislature that, effectively, meets year round almost. So, we're gonna continue to work on all of this. I just look back at this past year. April, people will be turning to taxes here soon, And because of what we got done, first time in over 20 years, we cut taxes, $1 billion tax cut. And the vast majority of that is going to go help a lot of lower income and middle income folks. In April, families in Massachusetts are going to see the most generous child independent tax credit in the entire country. I'm happy about that. You know, I'm happy about the work that we were able to do to make Massachusetts through that tax cut more equitable and more competitive. I'm happy we were able to get past free breakfast and lunch for every school kid in Massachusetts. That's a big deal. Also saves parents money and headache and deals with stigma. I'm proud of the fact that we have Mass Reconnect. Okay, that was the program that we dreamed up that basically it makes community college free to anybody 25 years and older. We all know people who weren't able to start college or finish a degree for one reason or another. And now they're going to be able to do that. And you know, just since we launched that program alone, we've seen a 44% increase in community college enrollment. And that means people who are going and getting certification and programming and degrees for jobs that are available today. We all have goals, you know, and a lot of the folks in the audience have goals around, you know, what we want to do with climate, what we want to do with continuing to pioneer research and development. And, you know, the way we get there is by working together and supplying a workforce, and that's something that Mass Reconnect is all about. You know, I could go down through the list. Look at the way we stabilized childcare this last year. We stabilized the childcare system. It's still too expensive. We're working on driving down the costs. But we got a nice shout out from U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo the other day because she said, you know, Massachusetts recognizes that a foundational piece of economic development and growth and stability is childcare. And she commended us for really leaning into the investments that we've made in childcare this year. So, you know, I look with optimism to what's ahead. Do we have a lot of work on our plate? Absolutely. Housing's probably at the top of the list. We've got a great economic development bill that we're about to file as well. But I know we can do it working together. We can get a lot done.
Revenue shortfalls don't make you nervous either.
Nobody likes a revenue shortfall, right? We all want more money in our pocket.
But you have big plans.
But no, I think let's distinguish a couple things, right? The budget, that's talking about money that we have. That's revenue. So I'm always, you know, we're watching to see what's happening with revenue. We have the benefit of some new revenue this year with the surtax, which we have made good use of in terms of investments in education and transportation following the will of the voters. But when I talk about the housing bill, that's a bond bill. The economic development bill, that's a bond bill. That's about giving us the authority to go out and raise money through the issuance of bonds that can be, you know, deployed and invested in what we think is going to make a big difference. And you know, that's the plan for housing. We're down a couple 100,000 housing units in this state because for years, for decades, people have not done what needs doing when it comes to housing. We suffer. You know, it's funny. I spoke at the chamber this morning. I talked about our economic development bill. I talked about life sciences and climate tech and these other things. After I was approached by a group of women who run an executive search firm for life science companies. And they said, Governor, thank you so much for talking about housing. It is the number one reason we can't land people here. We've got so many people who want to come to Massachusetts because we've got this incredible ecosystem of innovation and research and hospitals and companies in life sciences. But she said, I can't find an affordable place for them and their family to live. And so they go elsewhere. She's like, thank you, because you want life sciences to soar, you know? We've got to fix housing.
Well, we want to get to Milton and what happened over there regarding housing, but before we do, I know you were very passionate about Steward Healthcare. A nurse from St. Elizabeth texted a while ago saying that, yeah, the Department of Public Health is on site, but they're accompanied constantly by management, and this nurse claims at least that they are unable to talk to people at the Department of Public Health about problems there. I hope she's exaggerating, including rats running around the medical floors. I certainly hope that's not true, but anyway, that is her claim. So Milton has just basically said that they're going to ignore the law that requires them to create new zoning so they can have multifamily housing in Milton. What can be done about that? We talked to the AG about this as well. I mean, she's suing them today.
Yeah, she filed a lawsuit, and I strongly support the lawsuit. The law is clear, and it needs to be enforced. As I was just saying, housing is the number one issue, the number one challenge facing our state. And the only way we deal with that is to create more housing. I put forward a plan in that bond bill I'm talking about where we can identify state-owned land, unused, uninhabited mills and buildings around the state, and give people the money to go out, right, and rehab it and turn it into housing. There's money there to rehab 40,000 units of public housing that are currently going unused because they're in lousy condition. There's money there for the development of affordable housing for lower income folks, as well as market rate housing. Think about the number, and I focus on this, the number of 20 to 40-year-olds, right, who may leave the state because they can't afford to find not just a house to buy, but a rent that works for them. And God forbid if you have kids, right? So, we need to get this done. And the MBTA Communities Act, a law the legislature passed that Governor Baker signed, is a good and important start. And that required communities to zone and rezone in certain areas to build more housing capacity out. Let me remind you that nearly all communities have complied. All right, they've done that work. That's good. Now, Milton has more work to do, and I have said that my team and my Secretary of Housing will continue to stay at the table with Milton. We gave Milton $60,000, the state did, to help them work through what we thought was a good plan. The referendum vote was disappointing to me. And I also was clear that there would be consequences for that, specifically the withholding of state funding for various grants.
Like what? What does that mean?
I mean, there's $140,000 they're supposed to be getting for the construction of a seawall.
Yeah.
They're not going to get.
Yeah.
I mean, there are any number of things. And this didn't come out of the blue. We'd been warning communities for the better part of a year explicitly about what was at risk should they not do what needs doing. So we'll stay at the table. I hope we can, work with Milton and see a new plan. But the message should be clear to every community out there that we meant what we said in terms of compliance and enforcement. And we really need, the bottom line is this. Think about this. I'm looking out at the audience, and for those listening, no one city or town on its own can solve the housing crisis. Everybody's got to work together. Everybody's got to do their part. The reality is, if we don't work together and really do everything we can to lean into housing production, which is what my bill does, in addition to some policy changes like allowing folks with property and attached garages on their property to turn those into housing units. We call them accessory dwelling units. They call them so-called granny flats in other places. Whatever you want to call them, they have been a surefire way to increase housing availability in a state. California's doing it. A bunch of states are. We should be doing that stuff in Massachusetts. So, this is the time for collective action, for the collective good, because the trajectory of this state, where we go in terms of economic development and growth, whether people decide to come to school here, study here, stay here, grow a business here, grow a family here, for those of us, who were born and grew up here, our ability to stay here, grandparents to be near grandkids, all this depends on us taking action. We got to start by passing that housing act that I talked about. We got to start community by community. Those of you who aren't involved, get involved. Run for planning board, run for your zoning commission, right? Get involved and help make the case to your neighbors about how important this is.
We're talking to Governor Maura Healey. Linda on Cape Cod is on the phone. Thanks for calling, Linda.
Hello, Linda.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much, Jim and Marjorie. I've been a fan for 25 years.
Thanks.
Thank
you for what you do.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Governor, I appreciate your commitment, both as governor and AG, to come on this show and take questions and talk about issues. My issue has to do with drug prices. I pay more for a medication just because I am a resident of Massachusetts. I have multiple myeloma. It is a blood cancer that is not curable, but it is treatable. A medication called Revlimid is standard of care for multiple myeloma patients, and ideally we're on it for years because it means that the cancer is at bay. It's been around for decades. It is very effective, but unfortunately it's incredibly expensive. A monthly supply is over $25,000. I have swallowed about $1 million of this medication already since my diagnosis in 2021, and I am only 56. Bristol Myers Squibb is the manufacturer.
Hey, Linda, I'm sorry. You have to ask a question, please, of the governor.
I'm
Thanks.
right there. Bristol
Thanks.
Myers Squibb offers patients a copay assistance for this program. It's available to anyone with private insurance. It reduces the copay to $10. I was able to participate but now as a Massachusetts resident, I'm no longer eligible. What changed is a generic hit the market, and even though that generic is also $1,000 a pill, and prices have continued to go up.
Hey, Linda, I hate to be
we're out of time
impolite.
here.
If you either can ask a question or we can put you on hold and connect you with the governor's office, since your case is not a simple one. Is that? Would you like to speak to Linda?
I think that's great. Linda, I appreciate the concern that you voice. It's one that a lot of folks struggle with in terms of the cost of drugs and needed medication. Why don't we just take your information so we can learn more about the specific generic and where it is on our formulary?
Linda, please stay on hold. We'll get all your contact information and you'll hear from the governor's office. Thank you for making your call, and we wish you a lot of good health luck in the future.
We're talking with Governor Maura Healey. We'll be right back after a quick break. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at facebook.com/GBH News and youtube.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marge Regan. We're live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, facebook.com/GBH News. We're joined now until a little bit after the 1 o'clock hour by the governor of the Commonwealth for obviously Ask the Governor. The lines are full, but you can text her at 877-301-8970.
Governor, before we get back to the call, a lot's been written about your former partner, appeals court judge Gabrielle Wolohojian. Everyone says she's the most qualified person and she's got a great record, etc. But since she was your former partner, it's almost like if you appointed your ex-husband or ex-wife. I mean, looks like it's kind of an inside deal, undermine the public trust in terms of being a nepotism involved. I mean, what do you think about that?
Look, I've said before that she is incredibly qualified. She was recommended under the prior administration for this position. She was once again recommended. I just happen to be the governor. So, I can't apologize for having had a personal relationship with somebody who is supremely talented. We worked in the same field. We were both lawyers, and I went on to become AG. She went on to become a judge on the appeals court. So I also want the public to know there's a process for handling any questions about that. It's something that I know Judge Wolahojian takes seriously. She addressed it the other day, which is to say that any matter that comes before her, she'll evaluate under the operating recusal provisions that all judges abide by. And her answer that she would evaluate on a case-by-case basis is exactly the answer that former SJC Justice Margie Marshall gave and said is the appropriate answer, and also the answer that Judge Nancy Gertner said is the appropriate answer, as evidenced in her letter today to the Boston Globe.
But still, the objects here are unusual. Let's put it that way. Like I said,
they are unusual. I mean, but as I say, I can't. You got me as Attorney General. You got me now as Governor. We had a relationship in the past, and I can't apologize for the career trajectory that we both happen to have been on. But I can assure you I have utmost confidence in the job that she'll do on an incredibly important court. I'm proud of that nomination. I'm proud of the nomination of former State Solicitor Bessie Dewar to the SJC a few weeks ago. And at this point, it's before the Governor's Council to decide and to vote on.
But the Governor's Council didn't really ask about which cases. She said a case-by-case basis. I mean, maybe it would be a good idea to say she would recuse herself from anything having to do with...
And I think they did ask her about recusal. She gave the appropriate answer. And as Justice Marshall said, and as Judge Gertner said, the answer is case-by-case. You are not to answer about hypotheticals as a judge when it comes to evaluating recusal. So the answer is the appropriate answer. She also underscored that by saying that she would in no way want to or ever sit on cases where there was an issue or a question. So, it is what it is. And as I say, it's with the Governor's Council, and I know that, and I stand by my nomination.
I have one quick question about recusal because I'm totally confused. I think I read in the Globe that you said you didn't see a need for recusal. I then read in an editorial in the Globe that when you were the Attorney General, and even after you ended being the Attorney General, Judge Wolahojian recused herself from every case involving the Attorney General's office, not a case-by-case basis. So, assuming those facts are right, forget what you said. Let's just talk about what she did while you were Attorney General, and even after your relationship ended is what I was trying to say, not when you ended as Attorney General. Why would she apply a uniform rule with Maura Healey as Attorney General and a case-by-case rule with Maura Healey as Governor?
Well, first of all, that's not what she said. And what was said is that it's one thing to go back and look at the record and be able to say, I recuse myself from, and this is the way I handled it. Also, I was Attorney General. I was the state's lead lawyer, the one practicing before those courts. It's a different position now as Governor when I'm not, and my team is not practicing before the court. So it poses a different question. What is important here, though, is that the answer on recusal has been said time and time again, including by some of the most illustrious and well-regarded justices of the state, that the answer to the question is, I will evaluate it on a case-by-case basis, which is the rule and operating principle of
Judge
recusal.
Gertner said it here, too, by the way, not just in the Globe. Roger, at the mic in the studio here, you were next on Boston Public Radio with the Governor.
Governor, I'm one of the many Massachusetts citizens who voted for you enthusiastically because of your excellent record as Attorney General on climate. As you know, private jets are the worst form of travel per passenger mile for their carbon footprint, emitting up to 14 times as much carbon per person as commercial jets. Do you agree that Massport's plan to massively increase private jet flights from Hanscom is simply incompatible with the benchmarks laid out in the Massachusetts roadmap bill on climate that is now state law?
Thank you, Roger.
Roger, good to see you, and thank you for the question. I'm certainly well aware of the concerns about emissions caused generally, but certainly from our transportation industry, which I think, as you know, accounts for about 40% of greenhouse gas emissions. And so I'm absolutely aware of and sensitive to that. As you also know, this matter is before our office in terms of MEPA review right now. So I'll make any announcements at the appropriate time through that process, but I certainly appreciate your advocacy. And you're joined by a lot of folks out here who made their way down to Copley Square to voice your views.
Does that mean when you just said a minute ago you'll make your position known at an appropriate time, meaning you'll take a position before MEPA as it's called as to what you would like them to do? Is that what we should?
No, I trust my team and the experts evaluating this, so
Okay.
that's under review.
What did you mean a second ago when you said to Roger, though, I'll make my
I think
position
he wanted
known?
me to weigh in, and all I'm saying is I'm not going
Okay.
to get ahead of our administrative agency on
You know,
that.
we talked a lot about this IVF situation after the abomination from the Alabama Supreme Court the other day. We talked with Judge Gertner, the same Judge Gertner, about the shield laws here in Massachusetts. And obviously the mifepristone case will be decided by the Supreme Court in June. Can you explain the state of affairs here, not just for people who live in Massachusetts, but people from other states who choose to take advantage of our laws and health facilities who don't live here?
It's pretty simple. You're a patient, you're a provider, come to Massachusetts. We will protect you, we will take care of you. We believe in women's reproductive freedom. We believe in our provider organizations, and we're going to continue to do just that. It's sad when the day comes that I have to stockpile mifepristone because we're living in a Handmaid's Tale scenario where that might be taken away. But, you know, this is the consequence. This is a consequence of Donald Trump, who, you know, the irony of him now exhorting the Alabama Supreme Court, the legislature now, to correct the ruling of the Supreme Court is just laughable. And I hope everybody takes that in. You know, the hypocrisy of somebody like Trump, Mike Johnson. Give me a break. He was responsible for creating that Supreme Court that issued the Dobbs decision. And Dobbs was just the start of this, right? And the latest chapter was the Alabama Supreme Court. But this is what we got with Donald Trump, okay? So think about that in November. I'm proud of the fact that Massachusetts, I was just bragging on, 18 out of 20 of the world's leading life sciences companies are in Massachusetts. We've got steward, conversation notwithstanding. Remember, this is a home to some of the best hospitals in the world and the most compassionate caregivers and, people who pioneered things around IVF. So we're going to stand strong with that, and we're going to fight for Massachusetts. Because, by the way, on that mifepristone case that is before the Supreme Court, one of the things that's so upsetting about that is that it challenges the role of the Food and Drug Administration, experts, right, who have determined something like Miffy as safe and effective, right? It questions them and wants to supplant scientists and experts and public health officials with judges, who are, put there on various courts. And, it's just so wrong. IVF, think about IVF. Think about all the life-saving treatments and cures and innovations in so many aspects of health that are pioneered right out of here in Massachusetts. And so, you issue a decision like that, don't think about coming from Massachusetts. Don't think about it. We're having none of it.
Governor Healy, I'm getting a lot of texts from people. I guess you could say that they resent the help that the Commonwealth is giving to people that are coming here from different countries because they think that they're getting the short end, and people are getting 3 squares a day and a place to live, et cetera. Talk about your policy about migrants in the Commonwealth.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is not a problem that Massachusetts created. It's a problem that was created by Congress's failure to act over many, many years. And the shame of it is that there was a path to solving this. 2 weeks ago, one of the most conservative members of the United States Senate joined forces with a Democrat and independent, put forward a bipartisan bill that would have hardened border security, put more personnel on the border, put in resources to address things as well, like the flow of fentanyl back and forth, would have provided funding to states like Massachusetts that have had to shoulder the burden of the migrant crisis, and fixed so many aspects of our immigration system. And then Donald Trump spoke and said, there should be no deal. I don't want to give Biden a win, so nobody's going to vote on that. And then they all walked from the table. It's incredibly disappointing because that plan, which is a plan that President Biden supported and said he would sign, and he's going to go to the border in a few days to make that point clear, once again, that could have taken care of this. What I have said, though, here is that we have a legal obligation under our right to shelter law to house people. We're doing the best we can. We've also focused very much on getting people jobs, getting them work permits so that they can get plugged in with employers. We've processed 3,000 people to date. 3,000 people who are going to go out and fill the jobs that we need filled in construction, in hospitality, in our nursing homes, in our hospitals, and so much more. Across this country, and I talked to Democrat and Republican governors. We talked a lot about this when I was in D.C. Everyone needs workers. We've got declining birth rates in this country, right? We need immigration. We need folks coming here. And we need to make sure it's done in a way that is lawful and that makes sense. But where we are right now is a scenario that, due to the failures of congressional Republicans to act, we're going to continue to shoulder the burden in our individual states.
But however, I think there's one exception. I think both of us share your perspective.
And also, I just want to say, I understand the concerns that people raise about a view that some may be skipping the line or getting things that they don't have access to. And I'll just say this. Our emergency shelter system right now in Massachusetts, half of it is are folks who are Massachusetts families. Half of them are Massachusetts families. And, it's one of the reasons we put forward this proposal on housing, because we just don't have enough housing in this state. Even if we have vouchers and things that people can use to go get an apartment, we don't have apartments out there that they can afford to move into. It's one of the reasons we need this housing bill passed. And so we're going to continue to work on getting people working, continue to push for more housing in the state, and continue to provide the supports that we've provided already to the domestic Massachusetts population.
Speaking of getting people to work, though, Margie and I were just talking about you and getting people to work the other day on the radio, and you discussed with us last month or the month before how you were expediting work permits for those who were permitted under federal law to have work permits.
Yeah.
But we'll ask you the same question we've asked you, I think, for 3 months. Our understanding, and I think you've confirmed this, is President Biden, without congressional approval, could expedite work permits for a larger percentage of the migrant population. And assuming that's true, which I believe it is, why hasn't he?
He has. Honestly, there may be some more things around the edges that the Biden administration can do, but I can tell you, it's one thing to be able to say we're going to do something, okay, but you also need bodies to operationalize that, okay? You need judges in immigration courts to deal with backlogs. You need people at the border processing people, right? And fulfilling those work authorization requests. Congress refuses to provide a dime for that funding. So, the president's in a difficult position. I appreciate, though, what the president has done. The one thing, that we were able to do with the administration, because we're not getting a dime from Congress, is say, hey, can you send people from Department of Homeland Security to Massachusetts, which they did. We paired them up with members of our team, members of the Attorney General's office, legal services organizations, volunteer lawyers, and in quick order, at one of our local military bases, we processed 3,000 almost migrants for work authorizations. Now they're coming back. And we've got two people I hired specifically, who are matching up employers around the state with those migrants, which at the end of the day will be good for our economy. We need the workers. It's also the case that we need to continue to push for more federal funding and relief, which I'm not giving up on, but I'm just going to be honest with people about the state of play here. The fault is on Congress. The fault is on the Republican Party right now, which seems far more interested in listening to and following, and not all Republicans, but unfortunately the zeitgeist of that party right now is to do whatever it is that their perceived nominee wants them to do, which includes refusing to do what this country needs.
Let's go to
right
Kevin.
now.
Kevin is at the mic at the library. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Governor. My name's Kevin. I live in Hingham. And I wanted to follow up on you asking for community support around infrastructure. So in terms of climate resilience, there are billions of dollars in infrastructure law to get communities to upgrade their electrical infrastructure and to put utilities underground. And on the South Shore on 3A, that would all be very, very helpful. So what do we do in our communities to make that happen? Do we contact our green community initiatives? coordinator? Do we contact Department of Utilities? How do we help you get those federal dollars to Massachusetts?
Well, stay on the line, and I can tell you exactly, Kevin, how you can get plugged in. I should say stay in the building and make sure we get your contacts. One of the exciting things that we did recently, and I think about Hingham as a coastal community in particular, is we formed for the first time a coastal community stakeholder group working directly with our Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs to sort of game plan where we need to make those strategic investments in infrastructure, how we can better work state, supported, we hope, by federal funding, but also just state funding, working directly with communities as they map out and plan infrastructure projects in Hingham and elsewhere. So I want to make sure that you're up to speed on all of that work. But I certainly appreciate the focus on this. You know, it breaks my heart when I look at the paper today, of course, and see the picture of the poor guy from Leominster, right? We had devastating floods. We will continue to see more devastating floods. And we know that FEMA doesn't have the formula to address this. There aren't state funds available. The cities and towns don't have funds available. One of the things I proposed a few weeks ago in our budget was the creation of a fund. We would capitalize it with some revenues to make sure that we have a fund set up to help cities and towns build back in resilient ways, so that they can actually afford to repair the dam or the bridge or the culvert. I mean, they need that money. And by the way, it's no good if they have to be reimbursed because they don't have the money on the front end to be able to pay for these things. So all this work, we're really, really focused on, Kevin, and I appreciate your interest and support.
Leave your contact information and we'll share with the governor's office. Lawrence, also at the BPL mic. Lawrence, welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Governor.
Good afternoon, Lawrence.
I am from Riverside, Cambridge. My question is, we were left out of that process of making us prisoners for the weekend when they shut down Memorial Drive. Granted, right now, it seems to be set back to the original pre-COVID status. But also on the desk of your office and the legislation is to reenact that. And again, our same governmental body has left us out of every process, including we met with the now DCR Commissioner Arrigio on January 30th, who was promised to have a meeting with us this week. Unfortunately, that meeting has been canceled due to the fact he said he has not counseled with you. I'm certain, in hearing all the wonderful things you're doing, that this individual can do his task and move it forward. So 2 things, please. 1, can we have some written communication from the now commissioner who has sent us none, who has promised us continuously and nothing? Second, can we get an answer to something that is totally absurd, to make one neighborhood, 1 out of 11 held DCR front water properties, take on the task of being held prisoners from Friday to Monday? And I'm only putting that because those are when the holidays happen. And, the state's only got so much money.
We got it, Lauren. We got it. You've done it eloquently, I should say. We're running out of time. That's the only reason I'm cutting you off. Mm-hmm. Governor, do you want to respond to Lawrence, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have had meetings, we've had discussions, and you were part of those discussions, I think, as part of the Riverbend Park Association. Just so folks know, the issue is this. Before COVID, Memorial Drive was closed on Sundays. During COVID, public health emergency, they closed it down on Saturday and Sunday. Mm-hmm. So there were calls from some people, electeds, and some others, residents, to keep that going. Close it down both Saturday and Sunday. And then there were concerns raised by members of the Riverbend Park community and the surrounding community that, hey, if you close it down, you've got traffic being diverted through our neighborhoods, continuing to the exacerbation of air pollution and poor air quality, right? So we hear you, we see you, we've been at those meetings. What I asked Commissioner Arrigo to do, who came on this year and is doing a great job at DCR, was to say, hey, we're hearing mixed messages. So let's make the call on this. Let's go, let's hear from community. You'll hear soon on that. Again, this is something that happens, what is it? It's April to November, is when this happens. So we're coming up on it, and you will hear very soon. But I appreciate and have continued to appreciate the input of community members. You know, mine is a team that is very focused on issues of environmental justice. I'm proud as governor that we have an administration that for the first time put 14 environmental justice fellows in communities around the state. That's how committed we are to the concerns that you, Lawrence, and others raise. And so we'll be getting to you soon.
You only have a minute left, I know, and thanks for your generous contribution of time here. You know, you talked about the situation in Milton. Yesterday we talked about the no vote in Dedham about expanding the workforce to prepare meals for migrants.
Oh yeah, the church was leading it.
3-2 voted down by, I think, the zoning board. You mentioned the resistance of some communities to whatever infrastructure is needed to expand clean energy, and that. We talk a lot about the rise, what we perceive as the rise of NIMBYism in Massachusetts and how much it worries us. Do you worry about it? And what do you say to people who are protective of their own space, sort of over the common good, for lack of a better expression, Governor?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll say a couple things. You know, Kim Driscoll and I come to these jobs with a real sensitivity to the needs of communities, cities and towns. Obviously, she was the mayor of Salem for a good number of years. I'm somebody who grew up in a small town, and you know, my parents were selectmen and on the planning board and conservation commission and zoning and you name it, right? So one thing is clear to us, you know, first of all, NIMBYism has existed since the dawn of time, right? That's nothing new. It's also the case, though, that people have legitimate concerns and fears and, you know, ideas about how things should be done. It's why we've invited people in for conversation. It's why we will continue to. We also do need to recognize that, you know, one of the special and wonderful things about this place is we're coming up on town meeting season. 351 cities and towns, controlling a lot, local control over things like education, for example. We also, though, need to recognize that to solve the challenges that we need to solve for our state, we can't go it alone, town by town, city by city. We need a collective agreement. We need collective buy-in, you know? It's the only way this is gonna work. If you got one member of the orchestra playing off on their own, not in sync with others, you know, you're not gonna deliver the symphony that people wanna hear. So that's where we're at, and we're going to continue to work with cities and towns, but we need everybody at the table. We need people to find common ground on things like housing. It's never one size fits all, community by community, you know, different needs, different ways of doing things, but the point is engagement, communication, collaboration, partnership. That's how we're going to get things done. That's how we're going to move Massachusetts forward. Massachusetts will continue to lead for the next 250 years if we do it that way.
Governor Healy, thanks so much for your time, as always.
Thank you
We really
very much.
appreciate it.
That was Governor Maura Healey, who was kind enough to spend an hour with us, and we hope she's back in March as well. Thank you very much again, Governor Healey. Up next, we're going to talk with CNN's John King. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GB8, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. What a thrill to hear John Parker doing that little promo there for the station. We're live. He did. We're live at the library. Jim Browdy, Marge Regan, streaming at youtube.com and facebook.com/GBH News. Starting next Wednesday, we are here 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. Hope you'll join us for all three. We're joined now on Zoom, though, by the pride of Dorchester. That, of course, is John King. John is CNN's chief national correspondent, involved in two great reporting projects, this election cycle all over the map and the battle. John.
And most likely never to be introduced as governor on this program.
I know.
Well,
yeah, Governor
yeah.
Maura Healey's kind enough to spend a month with time with us every month, and we appreciate it greatly. But let me ask you about Michigan. John, this is a big state if in the presidential race, obviously. Many Arab Americans out there and Muslim voters in anticipation of the state primary are doing this, urging some people to vote as uncommitted on their Democratic primary ballot as a protest to what President Biden, in their view, has not done about the all the deaths, up to I think 29,000 now, in Gaza. What do you think of this? I mean, is this going to be a big deal in this election today?
I think we need to see how high the uncommitted vote is tonight and then see how much of a message. It will be a message to President Biden. I think the question is how much of a message. But Marjorie, the math is pretty simple here. There are more than 200,000 Muslim voters in the state of Michigan. There are more than 300,000 if you add in registered voters who are of Middle Eastern or Northern African descent. So you have your Muslim Arabs. You also have a lot of Christian Arabs and people from that part of the world who trace their families back to that part of the world there. President Biden carried Michigan by about 154, 155,000 votes. It was actually one of his bigger wins among the battleground states. How did he do it? Arabs overwhelmingly supported him. About 2/3 of Arab voters supported him. Younger voters supported him. Who is most mad about the president's handling of the Israel-Gaza conflict? Arab Americans and younger voters. So the math is bad for the president right now. So we need to see what this uncommitted vote is, and then we need to see what happens as we go forward. If you've noticed, as recently even as last night when he appeared on a late night show, President Biden's tone has shifted quite dramatically in the last couple of weeks when it comes to this. He's been much tougher in his language about Netanyahu and Israel, and he's saying that he thinks it's possible there would be at least a temporary ceasefire by early next week. Now, those negotiations are incredibly delicate, but the politics here for the president are dicey. The policy is even more problematic. The question is, are they going to remain at odds, or can he somehow bring them together, the politics and the policy?
You know, John, every time you go to the magic wall to do the electoral college stuff, I get nervous. So I'm nervous to ask you this question, too. Most commentators, I haven't heard you say this, but maybe you have, most commentators I've heard when talking about Michigan saying if Joe Biden does not win Michigan in November, he cannot mathematically be re-elected president of the United States. Do you subscribe to that notion?
It's really hard. It's not mathematically impossible. I would reject that notion. But if you take that out, the issue is Michigan a bellwether of other states, Jim, or is Michigan, because of the unique particulars we just talked about, the large Muslim population, the large Arab American population, some of them Christians, is that why he loses Michigan? Or is it because younger voters are down and the Arab vote is down? Michigan is more Democratic than Wisconsin. Michigan is more Democratic, you could argue, than Pennsylvania. So that argument that others are making is that if you're losing Michigan, you're also losing some other places. You're probably losing Georgia, for example. And most of the time that's true. Most of the time, that's true. I do think there are some unique circumstances, Trump's appeal with auto workers and blue-collar workers in Michigan. So Michigan is both a bellwether and a unique circumstance, if you will. And I think when we get closer to November, we need to figure out which of those is carrying the day.
We're talking to John King from CNN.
You know, you mentioned that the politics for Joe Biden are dicey, and we're going to talk to our listeners about this afterwards. But you see not just Arabs, but a lot of Jewish Americans are upset with what their government, or not their government, but the Israeli government is doing with Gaza. Why doesn't Joe Biden say what Bernie Sanders has said up in Vermont, and also Peter Welch, the new Democrat up there, and I guess this Jeff Merkley from Oregon? They've all asked for conditions on the money to Israel, which obviously is stuck at the moment. But in any case, that doesn't seem unreasonable. Why can't he do that?
Joe Biden traditionally has been among the most pro-Israel Democrats, pro-Israel members of the Democratic Party. He has been for years, including his time in the United States Senate. So that is not where he is right now, and there's no indication that that's where he's going to go, except for he has not linked U.S. aid to Israel to any of the tougher statements he's made recently, but the administration has condemned as illegal new Israeli settlements in the West Bank. You saw the President of the United States again last night saying he hopes these negotiations work, and there's at least a ceasefire for Ramadan and some hostages are released. You don't say those things publicly just to say you hope that the violence stops and the people stop dying, the innocent people stop dying. You say that because you're trying to put public pressure on Israel. And so the president is getting that way. But he traditionally, Marjorie, that is where he has been. I was in a synagogue, a Reform synagogue here in Washington with my son just a week or so ago, and there's a great sign. You mentioned, the American Jewish community. I think a lot of people think they're all pro-Israel. I think they are anti-terrorism, and they are anti-Hamas. The sign in the synagogue was Hamas out of Gaza, Netanyahu out of Israel. And I think that's a pretty popular sentiment among a lot of Jews in the United States.
We're talking to John King. John, can we come back to, we are in Washington. I just saw Mike Johnson walk out of the meeting in the White House with the 4 congressional leaders, 2 of each party, with the president, saying, and I'm quoting from what the little thing said from your station, "I'm very optimistic we can reach a deal." I assume this is on government shutdown, not Ukraine. Is that the conventional wisdom, that despite him having whatever he has now, only a 2-vote majority and a lot of unhappy, hard-right members of the House, that we will not have to live through a shutdown come the end of the week?
I think the conventional wisdom, the right wisdom, is that the Speaker does not want to shut down, that the Speaker believes that very narrow majority would be put even more at risk if House Republicans are blamed for a shutdown. And he also can count. Whatever you think of the Speaker's politics, he can count. And the Senate Republican leader, the Senate Majority Leader, who's a Democrat, the House Democratic leader, who's obviously in the minority in the House, and the President of the United States all want to get this done. And the question is, can House Republicans come to the table and negotiate a deal? So I would take the Speaker at his word that he does not want a shutdown. I would stop right there and remember the last couple months of American political life and see if he can sell that to his members. So do you get a deal? And if something comes to the House floor that relies on a ton of Democratic votes, will we have another drama where, next week or the week after we're talking about another very short speakership, or at least a threat to another very short speakership? So this is a giant test for the relatively new Speaker. And again, take him at his word. He doesn't want to do this. He understands both from a government operation standpoint and from a political standpoint, it would be a mess for the Republicans to be blamed for this. The question is, can he pull it off with his group? Now, you could avert a government shutdown with Democratic votes if the Speaker brings things to the floor and the vulnerable Republicans from Biden districts and just governing conservative Republicans just say, we're not going to shut the government down. But does he have a revolt to his right? I think that's the bigger question.
Speaking of bringing things to the floor, I don't quite understand. I think the term is a discharge petition. Virtually everybody who supports additional funding for Ukraine, which in the Senate includes virtually all the Democrats and not an insignificant number of Republicans, even though not a majority. And I think we all know Mike Johnson says there will not be a vote unless there is a border deal. And of course, there was a border deal, and he stopped the border deal that would have allowed money to happen to Ukraine. We don't have to go through that again. I think most people believe that with Democrats and a decent number of Republicans, support for Ukraine would pass in the House of Representatives. Is it realistic to think that the Democrats could engineer this? Well, first of all, what is a discharge petition? How often do we ever see this from the minority party? And is it worth our time even to be talking about, or is it just totally unrealistic?
I wouldn't say it's totally unrealistic. I would think at the moment it seems less likely. You should not talk about it, but you should keep it way back or way low on your list of options. A discharge position is a majority of the members of the House, regardless of party, can just sign a piece of paper that says, we want this bill taken out of committee. In other words, it's not going to go to committee, it's going to come straight to the floor. So H.R. 1, number it what you will, the bill to send Jim Browdy money or send Ukraine money, we're going to bring it to the floor. And if a majority of members sign that petition, then it can come to the floor. It rarely happens because one of the things you do, especially when you have a narrow majority, any speaker, whether it was Nancy Pelosi, just last year, or Kevin McCarthy or Speaker Johnson, with a narrow majority, you understand you're going to have problems on every controversial issue, which is just about every issue nowadays, is going to be hard for you. So one of the things you tell people is, Jim, I know I'm going to lose your vote on this. Jim, I know, Marjorie, I'm going to lose your vote on that. But on party votes, you have to stay with the party. And so the leadership says you can't vote for the discharge position. You don't give your absolute word, but you more or less give your word in a narrow majority that you would only do that under the most rare of circumstances. The question is, does Ukraine end up rising to that level of becoming the most, and given all the developments right now, it could. It could. I'm not going to say it will, but it could.
What is the sense, though? I mean, we had obviously the killing of Navalny last week. We've had all this talk about Putin and Tucker Carlson's crazy interview with him, and just reporting this week as the third year begins of that war over there, just the horrors that Ukraine is enduring. We spoke about this. We had the two musicians from Ukraine here a couple of weeks ago. They were from the National Symphony, and I was like ashamed because we've just pulled the rug out from underneath them. I mean, they're even people that are very conservative have got to feel some of that in the House.
This is one of the most glaring examples of the total Trump makeover of the Republican Party. This is not Ronald Reagan's party. This is not George W. Bush's party. This is not John McCain or Mitt Romney's party. This is Donald Trump's party. And the growing isolationism in that party is very, very real. And that's what a lot of these House Republicans are responding to. They go home and they have voters who say, why are we protecting Ukraine's border when we can't defend our own? And that's a logical argument, actually. The idea that why can't we deal with our own issues and helping somebody else? That's a fair question. But they don't want to make the argument, okay, we're going to work on that. We will work on the border. We will continue to press for the border. However, this is a global crisis, and the domino effect, if we don't stand with Ukraine, look at your children and your grandchildren and think about their grandchildren. And if we don't do this, we're helping create an unstable or worse world. So a lot of it is the isolation in the Republican Party. I would also make the case from my travels that you hear a little bit of this, not that they want to walk away from Ukraine from Democrats, but why isn't the president explaining this more? Why isn't the president rebutting the arguments of these isolationist Republicans? And so I think it's a combination of the two, that the president thinks he's right. And sometimes when you think you're right, you don't continue to repeat your case. And I think this is an example of that. He thinks he's right and he's on high moral ground, and he thinks most of America's with him. And he's probably right about the most part. But because of the complicated politics of the House of Representatives, because we're in a presidential election year, because Donald Trump has been, reluctant, if not just against saying anything critical of Vladimir Putin. And you mentioned Tucker Carlson. That tells you all you need to know, Marjorie. That's where the energy is in today's Republican Party. He went over there and kissed the ring. I'm going to be polite. I'm going to leave it there. And everyone just shrugs and says, oh, cool. Ronald Reagan's flipping at the notion of that.
He and his wife, Mercedes, are flipping. So, John King, I told you I get nervous whenever you go to the magic wall and you're going to do the electoral count. I also got nervous watching CNN last night. I've been saying to Marjorie for months and months and months that in addition to the usual tricks of Donald Trump and his acolytes, that AI is going to be a horror show come election time. I'm watching CNN last night, and there was a report about the guy who actually made the AI robocall that went to New Hampshire with Joe Biden, not really Joe Biden, an AI Joe Biden, saying, don't vote now, save your vote for November, etc. It was a magician from New Orleans who said because of the capacity of AI, he was able to do it in like 5 minutes. And then an AI CEO was on saying how easy this is to do now. Are people worrying that the night before the election, 3 million robocalls go out saying, Hunter Biden slaughtered baby deer last week and Joe Biden was there to cheer him on? I mean, seriously, some horrible thing about Biden. I don't believe Biden would do this. That's why I'm saying about Biden. What are the campaigns doing, if anything, with the AI world to protect against a far more massive and damaging version of what happened in New Hampshire?
And Jim, you're mentioning it in the campaign context. Just imagine just somebody. You said you don't think Biden would do this. I agree with you. However, what if somebody who favors Biden or just doesn't like Donald? an individual person, as Trump used to always say, the 300-pound guy in his basement. So I have a relationship with the NBA, the National Basketball Association, and as part of All-Star Weekend, they have this technology summit, and I moderate a panel every year, and I learn tons from it because you're around some of the brightest minds in technology. This year, I interviewed Eric Horvitz. He's the #1 guy at Microsoft. He's essentially their architect of AI, in charge of the AI program. And he said these incredibly optimistic things about, I have multiple sclerosis, as you know. He was like, he bets in 5 years, there's, enormous progress in autoimmune diseases like MS. He says he thinks cancer research will, just advance exponentially because of the power of AI. But he also then conceded, that there are a lot of, if this gets in the hands of bad actors, horrible things could happen. We're talking about the context of a campaign. A lot of people at places like the Pentagon and defense ministries around the world, or electric grids around the world, are worried about this. And so I came away from the conversation thinking either we're either going to live in paradise or we're all going to die. It's A or B. And I'm over exaggerating there, but that's the way I came away from it, that you have this amazing possibility, and yet. So I do worry about it. You said, are people worrying about it in the context of the campaign? I am. Can they show John King at the Magic Wall showing something that's not true? Doctor the results. Can they show on the eve of the election Donald Trump or Joe Biden saying something that is not them? That is not what they, that is outside of the box of what they say and believe. So I'm incredibly nervous about it. The tech companies they announced that around President's Day weekend, they did announce an agreement to work together, even though they're rivals in developing the technology, to work on things like watermarks and fingerprints and things like that. So it seems like they understand the risks here. But you see the fights now about, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and everything else that are like in the rearview mirror, fights about things that happened days and weeks and years ago. So are you confident? You just talked about a government shutdown. Are we confident that this government at this moment is ready to deal with the regulation challenge of that? That's what frightens me.
Talking to John King from CNN.
So the Alvin Bragg trial about the hush money allegedly paid to Stormy Daniels by former President Trump, Stormy Daniels, I should say, that's March 25th. What happens to the campaign then when this trial begins?
Great question. Donald Trump has decided to show up in court a lot when he doesn't have to. A lot of these other hearings, and I don't say that to be critical or not. He has decided to show up at a lot of court hearings where his physical presence is not required, and he has raised money off that, and he has turned it into a political statement. When he is actually on trial, the expectation is that he would be in the courtroom for that. I suppose there are chances, times you could ask for permission not to be, but the expectation is that the defendant is there for something like this. And so I don't think he gets a pass to go campaign in those cases. I still want to see the gavel come down and the jury be seated and the trial begin before I won't be skeptical that, that they will find some other way to try to delay it. But if it happens, then he's going to be off the trail. You can campaign at night. Court is usually 9 to 5 or something like that. You can campaign at night, and he's got a plane, and he can come back the next day. To me, the spectacle of that, we always talk about, is anything going to change public opinion of Donald Trump? So far, the things that history told us might hurt him have actually helped him, like 91 charges against him, like indictments in federal court and state courts in Georgia and New York, or it's Manhattan in New York, not a state court. But he has defied gravity, legal gravity, political gravity, common sense gravity forever. Will actually sitting at a table as a defendant do anything? We'll find out if and when that happens.
By the way, speaking of him prospering from what for any other candidate would be probably the end of their career repeatedly. See the poll out of Harvard this morning, which basically says overall there's a 3% net positive view of Donald Trump with the American public and a minus 11, underwater as it's called, perception of Joe Biden. And I have to say, at least from my analysis, which is not nearly as well as informed as yours, not only is he maintaining his strength, but the deeper he gets in you-know-what, it appears to me at least that he's expanding it a bit. Am I wrong about that?
In the here and now, you're not wrong at all. I guess the question is, he's quote-unquote winning, and he is winning. I shouldn't put the quotes around it. He's winning the Republican primary contest. He's 5-0 in the Republican primary contest. It looks like, he's going to march to the nomination. His base is strong. He's He's going to have a rally around him moment among Republicans. I do think a giant question going forward is when you see Nikki Haley getting 43% in New Hampshire and 40% just shy of that in South Carolina, most of those Republicans will come home. But in a state like a New Hampshire or a Michigan, we're talking about the president's problems in Michigan. In a state like a Michigan or a Wisconsin or a Pennsylvania or a Georgia or Arizona, if 2 or 3% of Republicans just simply cannot stomach voting for Donald Trump and refuse and either vote for Biden or stay home, that could flip it too. So we talk about Biden's problems all the time on the margins, right? Tiny drop in black turnout, tiny increase in support for a Bobby Kennedy or a Cornel West. We should also talk about Donald Trump's problems on the margins. I think this election is going to be settled on those questions. I think that's why it's going to be so complicated. How many state ballots do the third-party candidates get on? Which states are those? Are they the really close states? But no question, Donald Trump has benefited in the short term. But even as we see these impressive wins, Jim, and they are impressive, whether you like Donald Trump or not, what he's doing is impressive in terms of winning the primaries. You do see signs of weakness in the suburbs, among people who say they could never vote for him. So I think there's a lot to sort out. We have 8.5 months, I think, between now and November. He does look strong right now. I think the biggest story in American politics at the moment is the resilience of Donald Trump. That does not mean it holds through November.
By the way, the most positive ratings, I should have said in that poll I just mentioned from Harvard, is the man you just mentioned, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., almost in a landslide compared to any other major American politician.
He's being ignored largely at the moment. If he becomes a factor in these states, you can be sure. And look, in my travels, there are a lot of Trump people who are attracted to Bobby Kennedy. So a lot of people make the knee-jerk reaction, and I think it's the fair one. The reflexive thing is that hurts Biden, and I think in places it will. But I think we don't really fully understand the potential draw of Robert Kennedy just yet. But if it starts getting above 1%, guess what? Prepare for incoming.
One last thing. This may be a stupid question, but when I see Joe Biden walking, he looks very frail. It looks like he's worried about his balance or his tiptoeing. I mean, what is he, 81? 81. I mean, maybe he's got arthritis or maybe he's got something wrong. I don't know. He clearly can't walk like he used to. What is wrong? I would almost feel better if I knew that, because age is such a big...
Meaning knew what he was suffering from?
Yeah. No, would that hurt him to say, I've got, I don't know, whatever would interfere with your ability to walk like that? I think that would help him, but maybe I'm crazy.
So I just got back from Pennsylvania, where I spent 3 days with voters. The youngest voter we were with was 71 years old. The oldest was 94.
Oh my goodness!
Can't wait.
That's my latest all over the map segment. It's going to roll out Thursday night. So your segue. Fantastic, Marty. I'm grateful for it. And you're right. And there's a split, largely along partisan lines. People, if you're a conservative, you look at Biden, you say he's too old. Look, he can't walk. Democrats are saying, oh, give it up. So he's a little, frail physically. That has nothing to do with his mental acuity. But there are a lot of Democrats who that they're for Biden. A lot of these Democrats who were for Biden say in conversations with friends and peers, they do get a lot of reservations and hesitation about what they see. So I think your point about transparency is an excellent one on any issue, but especially on this issue. Have the doctors come out more and talk about it. Have the president himself talk about, I can't run around like I used to run around, but look, here's what I'm doing here. Boom, boom, boom. I think, forget the number. In my travels, it is the perception that he's not vital and that he's not energetic and that people don't see him enough.
Yeah.
And so I think he needs to start there. But transparency about anything, and even him he joked about it last night, and he said, look at Trump's age, and he spun it on Trump's age as a term of policy. Trump wants to take us back. He took away Roe v. Wade. He has all the other policies that want to take America back. That's good. Ronald Reagan made the joke. I'm not going to quip about Walter Mondale's youth and inexperience. There are lighthearted ways to get at it, but I think bigger ways the president needs to address that.
Yeah, I always think he'd be better off with a cane, because it would make him
Listen to you.
Well, it's true. I mean, I saw him walking somewhere the other day, and I was like a nervous wreck. Is he going to tip over? I mean, he looked really like he was shaky. I'd rather see him with a cane and looking forceful than looking like he's about to tip over.
I'll pass that along. Hey, before you go, have you seen every episode of The Dynasty yet, John King, or no?
Oh my goodness!
I have not. Don't spoil it for me. I have some friends who spoil it for me. They send me texts all the time because I'm kind of busy at the moment, both in my life, my family life, and in my work life. Those kind of pleasures I'm putting off for a little break in the campaign schedule. So don't ruin it. But I think it goes something along I saw a story in the Globe that said, it blames Belichick and it overblames Belichick. I didn't read the whole story. I saw the headline and I shoved it away, saying nope.
Well, I've
Marjorie's
watched
watch every minute.
all 4 of them, and I can say Bill Belichick used to talk a lot more back in the early days, and he did more recently. But the first 4 ones, well, they get to Spygate.
Don't give it away.
But no, they're just really uplifting. I mean, you see back in 2001, you see 2002, you see how Drew Bledsoe was really quite gracious in that broken-hearted situation where Belichick chose Brady over Bledsoe. And remember, we had his father on the radio,
yeah,
Joe Bledsoe's father,
yeah.
and we asked him about this, and I'll never forget what his father said. He said, "What matters to me more is how my son conducts himself on the bench than in the field." And I thought, wow, what a great dad that is, you know?
He said it a little more beautifully than that.
He did.
He did.
I think Drew Bledsoe owns a winery out in Washington.
Yes.
Yeah.
That should be an all over the map stop. And you guys have to come with me.
It's a deal. Hey, John, we'll be watching Thursday night. I can't wait. All of the stuff you were doing, I know you don't need to hear it, with real people is the best of that kind of thing that anybody in television does. We really
watch
love
tonight,
it.
too. We're going to count him in Michigan.
Oh, good.
Of course. That's
Fantastic.
right.
Thank
John,
you so
thanks.
much, John.
Have a great week, guys. Thank you.
You too. We've been speaking with John King, CNN's chief national correspondent, involved with 2 great reporting projects this election cycle, all over the map and the battleground, which he just mentioned. And it is great to listen to him talk to these.
Well, you know why? Because he's so respectful of people, even when they're making up stuff about Donald Trump, he is a really respectful human being.
He asked them a question. They said they don't know because they were just beamed up and probed, and he goes right along and like, okay.
He's a respectful man.
He's a great guy.
And as a result of that, he gets much more out of people who probably wouldn't give it to a reporter from CNN than the average person would get.
Okay, up next, we're going to open the lines to ask you about the Michigan primary today. Early voting in Massachusetts is open for next week's primary, and the campaign to send a message to Biden about his response to the war of Gaza is in full gear out there in Michigan. What do you think it's going to mean here? What do you think it's going to mean today? In Michigan, you are listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and facebook.com/GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're obviously live at the library, streaming at youtube.com and facebook.com/GBH News. Starting next Wednesday, as you've heard us say, we will move to 3 days a week at the library, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. wonderful Newsfeed Cafe just feet away. We hope you will join us. You know, we ordinarily end the show with something light. We decided today, because of the vote in Michigan and because of the situation in Gaza, that we'd change gears just for a day. So as we discussed with John King a few minutes ago, Michigan voters are going to the polls today in their primary elections, and there's a movement gaining steam to vote uncommitted on the Democratic side in protest of Joe Biden's response to the war in Gaza. The mayor of Dearborn, a Democrat, Abdullah Hammoud, is signed on to the uncommitted campaign. Here's what he wrote in the New York Times. His, quote, greatest fear is that Mr. Biden will not be remembered as the president who saved American democracy in 2020, but rather as the president who sacrificed it for Benjamin Netanyahu in 2024. Meanwhile, a Wall Street Journal opinion piece earlier this month titled "Welcome to Dearborn, America's Jihad Capital" has prompted the city to step up police protection at places of worship. So the lines are open, 877-301-8970. We're checking in with you about your thoughts of the president's response to the war in Gaza, how it's affecting you ahead of the election. Massachusetts primary is a week from today on Super Tuesday. Actually, though, early voting started on Saturday and I think continues through Friday. Would you consider a similar tactic? You can do a write-in here, uncommitted if you choose, to send a message to the president ahead of the general election. The number is 877-301-8970. What did John King just say to you when you asked the question about why Biden didn't take a position more like senators, all Democrats, Merkley, Welch, and Bernie Sanders, vis-a-vis attaching some conditions to whatever amount of money would go to Israel for its defense?
Well, he said the politics here are very, very dicey, but on the other hand, that he's close to getting a ceasefire. We'll play some sound
temporary
of him
ceasefire,
talking about that in a couple of minutes. But that's what he basically said. He's been the number one, or not maybe the number one, but a huge supporter of Israel for his entire time in politics. And I think you got to hold two things at once, right? You can be a huge supporter of Israel, and you can be obviously the history of Israel and the reason there's an Israeli state and all that kind of stuff, and still be sitting here and obviously what Hamas did, the terrorists and the brutality and the grossness and everything else, and still say these people are starving to death in Gaza. The New York Times massive story on Sunday about you can't even, you're waiting for hours just to go to the toilet. There is no place to go to the toilet. Their children are having limbs amputated without anesthesia. There's no electricity, there's no food, there's no water. People washing themselves in the ocean over there and trying not to drink any water so they don't have to go to the bathroom. I mean, it's just this slow starvation is pretty tough to watch. So he didn't really give me an answer about why he isn't attaching some of these conditions, as Bernie Sanders and at least two more Democrats have said. It seems to me that makes a lot of sense. And there was I always talk about my favorite podcast, The Daily. Well, it is a great podcast. And they interviewed a woman this morning, a big Joe Biden person, went and campaigned for him back in 20. She's a Palestinian, though, and for her, he is letting her people be massacred.
Well, the interesting thing that we talk about all the time, even if there's a piece of Biden's policies, foreign or domestic, that people don't like, it has to be compared to the alternative. I don't know if you've heard, NPR has done some reports, long reports the last couple of days from Michigan, and particularly the Muslim Arab American population there doesn't care. And I don't mean that as a criticism of them. I mean, their position is this is the president. Virtually all of them supported Joe Biden's candidacy 3+ years ago. And I think the message they're conveying is if Joe Biden doesn't step up to the plate here, they won't vote. And as John just said a minute ago, John King, it's not mathematically impossible that Biden could be reelected losing Michigan, it would be really, really difficult. So this is it's a huge issue. And I'm not convinced that a temporary ceasefire, which is what Biden said on Seth Meyers' show last night, he hopes will go into place by Friday, particularly with Netanyahu, who I think is the biggest part of the problem, saying, even after this pause for however long it is and the release of 40+ hostages, we're still going to do what we were going to do to Rafah, which means more pain and misery. Did you read the story also? For those who say yes, but Netanyahu's right, which in the abstract he probably is, that Hamas has to be eliminated. Did you read the story in the New York Times about the leader of Hamas, how he's in the tunnels and he's surrounded by hostages? So the only way, allegedly, according to the reporting, the only way he can be gotten to by the IDF or whomever else is by sacrificing the lives of other Israeli hostages. So it's a mess. And as of the moment, it appears Joe Biden's going to pay a price.
I think the other thing that gets under people's skin is the embrace that Biden gave to Netanyahu. I mean, he's gone totally right-wing.
That was almost immediately after October 7th, though. That was prior to this carnage in Gaza.
That's
for the
right.
most part.
And as John King said, he has been tougher in talking about the illegal settlements in the West Bank. And we saw a wonderful front line about that, about these settlements being built with abandon by Netanyahu's government. But it's the fact that Netanyahu's government doesn't want to recognize any Palestinian states, wants to keep complete control of Gaza. I mean, these policies, I think, make it very, very difficult for people obviously whose families are in Gaza or who came from Palestine to be enthusiastic about Joe Biden. And some of them, they were talking this morning again that they realized that Trump would be worse, but they just can't bring themselves to support Joe Biden, even when the alternative is Donald Trump.
877-301-8970. So I guess there are really a couple of questions. What is your reaction to how our country is dealing with the situation in Gaza and how our country, through our president, is dealing with Netanyahu, the prime minister there? And secondly, does this uncommitted thing have an appeal to you? It's an alternative. I don't think there's an organized campaign here in Massachusetts like there is in Michigan, but it is an option for people. You know what we didn't mention, just occurred to me, there was a write-in campaign for a ceasefire in New Hampshire that got almost no support. Obviously, the demographics of the population are very different, but that even though Biden was not formally on the ballot, he did incredibly well in the write-in there. 877-301-8970 is the number.
One of the other things I think is very upsetting is that there was this United Nations group and they were members of they were supplying humanitarian aid, and some of them, it turns out, were involved in the massacre.
A dozen.
Yes, the Hamas atrocity attack on the Israelis back in October. But because of that, their work has been suspended. And the people in Gaza are not getting almost anything right now. An average of, this is according to The Guardian, an average of 500 trucks of aid used to be permitted by Israeli authorities to get into the territory. But now it's only like a couple of dozen, if that. And again, people are starving to death.
Okay, let's get to the calls. 877-301-8970. Where do you want us to go? Back in Brighton, please give us a little guidance, if you would. In a second, give us a little guidance, if you would.
We have a lot of...
Here we are. Ann in Charlestown, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Our apologies. Hi, Ann.
Hi, thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to remind, especially Marjorie, because she's very concerned about Joe Biden's walk and his gait. If you remember, when he first became president, he and Jill used to go out to the front of the White House and take a stroll with Major the dog. The dog broke his ankle. If you recall, he broke his ankle. He was in a cast and a boot for quite a while, carrying on his business, but in that condition. It was so sad to see him.
Can I cut you off for two reasons? One, because we're not talking about it. Two, neither of us know about it. And even if you're right, and you may be, Ann, the fact that we don't know about it suggests that Marjorie's right, that Joe Biden has got to be more forthcoming so that people do know about it. But I don't want to talk about why Joe Biden has a problem with his walk when we're talking about the fate of Palestinians. Ann, thank you for your call. Feel free to call another time. We can talk about that. 877-301-8970 is the number. We're going to Sarah and JP. Sarah, thank you for your call. Hi.
Hi. I've got a couple things I want to share with y'all.
Sure.
One is the no preference vote. We have to, in Massachusetts for Super Tuesday, we have to say no preference rather than uncommitted. That's what my understanding is, that if we do uncommitted, it won't be counted. If we do no preference, it will.
Oh,
And
I don't know. I don't know that
Okay.
either. I don't know that either. Well, what are you doing?
That's my
Is that what you're?
understanding from-
Is that what you're doing, Sarah? You voting?
I'm definitely going no preference.
Why is that?
Because I am infuriated. Joe Biden is not only just allowing, he's creating the death and destruction by U.S. sending weaponry there and not conditioning aid. There are several laws on the books, federally, like the Leahy Law and others, that condition aid to exactly this situation, and they're not being followed and haven't been for all the attacks going on. And I mean, for decades.
Okay, so Sarah, can you answer the second question that I didn't pose this as a question, the second issue? So you vote no preference on Tuesday. It's November, what is the date? 5th is the election, whatever date the election is in November. And on the ballot is Donald Trump and Joe Biden. What do you do in November?
I understand. I live in Massachusetts, and that's a gift for me right now because I literally, in all my heart and soul, have spent my life voting for the lesser of two evils, which I see Biden as at this point, and I still cannot vote for him. I cannot give, in all conscience, vote for him at this point because he is so two-sided and he is complicit in genocide. I'm sorry, but the term Genocide Joe is no joke.
Sarah, thank you for your call. We appreciate it. Who is this quote from
We're
here?
getting deluged by people
on Comrex,
reminding us
saying
that President Biden broke his ankle and was walking around in a boot.
Oh, I didn't know that. I don't remember.
I vaguely recall walking around in a boot and vaguely recall the dog being involved. The dog has been banished now, as you know, from the White House for biting 24 people.
Yeah.
But, you know, if that's the problem, you should tell us.
Okay, well, let's move on from that. Jim in a car, you're next on Boston Public Radio. We're talking about the situation in Gaza and its effect on votes in Michigan today and in Massachusetts today leading up to March 5th. Hi.
Hi there. I'm a middle-of-the-road guy, independent, been a Democrat all my life. I vote for stopping this war immediately and stopping or telling Netanyahu that the U.S. is going to stop funding if they don't wind it down and stop it. I think most people can see that this is just people in the pen they're gunning down. It's about all you can say. So
well, you know, Jim,
I'm
sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
You go ahead. No, you go ahead. My apologies.
No, I'm for Joe getting tough here. He needs to get tough. Joe Biden needs to go over there or send somebody. He's been sending people, but nothing's been happening.
Well, you know, Jim, let me tell you, I haven't said this before, but while the only thing that Biden publicly is advocating for is a temporary ceasefire, and as I said before, Netanyahu has made it clear when the ceasefire is over and 40-plus hostages return, he's ready to do what he does to Gaza again. A lot of people who have great expertise, and maybe this is Biden's thinking too, believe that if there's a 4 to 6 week ceasefire, at least until the beginning of Ramadan and then a little bit further, that's the end of this thing. So do you allow for that possibly being the long-term strategy for Biden, or you're not willing to give him an inch?
Well, I think if they can set that up, and, you know, negotiations go inch by inch.
Yeah.
A lot is behind the scenes. I think we should at least give them that. Yes.
Jim, thank you for your call. We appreciate it. 877-301-8978.
We have several texters who are voting no preference as a protest of the Biden candidacy. Joe from Denham says he is doing this, and some people are pointing out that that during the New Hampshire primary, twice as many people, I don't know this to be true, but this is what a texter says, wrote in other, including vote ceasefire, than Marianne Williams got, although she didn't get a huge vote up there in New Hampshire.
By the way, there is allegedly a no preference option, which is news to me, on the ballot here in New Hampshire, and I assume that was what that woman who called a minute ago was talking about.
Texter says, I hope uncommitted wins by a landslide today in Michigan, and I will be writing in ceasefire now here in Massachusetts on the 5th of March.
Barbara, and I don't know where you are, Barbara, but welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi. What I wanted to say is, obviously what happened by Hamas was horrific, but I feel when I hear and see about the Israeli invasion into Palestine, it's rage-filled. It seems out of control to me. And I wonder, with the Israelis' history, why there isn't more compassion for innocent people being killed. And as they continue this campaign, how much risk is there of actually killing some of the hostages?
Well, I think, we saw there were 3 hostages killed by IDF forces a month or maybe 2 months ago. I have to say, haven't seen any polling. I think a significant percentage of the population there would like to get rid of Netanyahu, not just because of the war, but because of his attempt to corrupt the constitutional process with their Supreme Court there. And as Marjorie has said before, I think a significant number of people who are pro-Israel in the United States of America are anti what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza. So the problem, which I was not aware of till yesterday when we were talking to Charlie Sennett, most analysts believe that if Netanyahu was replaced, the person most likely to replace him is no better when it comes to treating people with some level of humanity. You know, Barbara, thanks for the call. I don't think anybody with whom I've spoken, correct me if I'm wrong, Marjorie, disagrees with the notion that the ideal goal would be to eliminate Hamas. The question is about proportionality, which is in international law, as in addition to being in humankind, what's the appropriate level of response? If the goal is desirable, eliminating the terrorists, the killers, and Hamas, what level of collateral loss, horrible term, I shouldn't have even used that, loss of innocent life is acceptable? And at least as a layperson, and I know you feel the same way, it has far exceeded that level in Gaza.
Well, we're up to 29,000 now. That's an awful lot of people. Many of the texters are calling Netanyahu the Israeli Trump. And obviously, Trump was very tight with Israel during his time in office and moved the capital of Israel to Jerusalem. And Trump, you know, that's the irony here. Trump would be much worse for Gaza, but the upsetness with Joe Biden seems to be quite significant. Connie from Middleborough?
You only have a minute, Connie. Thanks for calling.
Oh, no, I'm Gloria Coney, C-O-N-E-Y.
Oh, Gloria, welcome to the show. Hi.
Thank you. I'm an 85-year-old African-American woman, and I've had to vote the majority of the time the lesser of the two evils. And I cannot understand how these people can be so one-sided that they cannot vote for Biden because of one thing. Do they not understand the danger that we're facing if the Republicans, if Trump get in? You know, I'm not understanding that.
Gloria, you're a perfect way to end the show.
That's
Gloria.
a very good point, Gloria. I think a lot of people feel exactly as you do, but obviously not everybody. Thank you for the call, and thank everyone for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio. We are done for today. Thank you to people that came down to the library. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined by NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan, Harvard national security expert Juliet Kayyem, NBC Sports Boston's Trenny Casey, and the Bay State Banner's Ron Mitchell, plus our animal expert naturalist Cy Montgomery.
Now I know why we end every show with the light segment. By the way, I feel a lot better at 2 o'clock than I do today.
I know. Well, yeah. Okay.
Nevertheless, thanks to the Attorney General and the Governor for spending an hour with us. We really appreciate that every month.
There were not a lot of yucks today, Jim. Not a lot of yucks.
No.
Okay. Our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer, John the Claw Parker, our executive producer, Jamie Bologna. Special thanks to the BPL team, Angelica Marrero, Maddie Geyer, Carly Corcoran, and Isabella Karen. Stay tuned for the Culture Show. It's right after us. It's right after the news, which is right after us, right here on GBH. Thank you, 89.7 GBH. I'm Marjorie Egan.
Well, I also want to remind people, Wednesdays next week, starting next week, 3 days a week, Tuesdays and Fridays are usual days, and Wednesday becomes a usual day as well. 3 days a week at the wonderful library studio. We hope you'll join us for any or all of those three. And I'm Jim Browning.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Thanks
See
again
you
for
later.
tuning in.
Thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.
Stay tuned for the Culture Show and have a great day.